Chapter 241. Total Suppression. Bang! A dull sound rang out. In an instant, a gust of wind blew and golden light burst out. In the explosion of light, a figure was pushed back. Qin Feng was pushed back dozens of steps before he stabilized himself. His face became even more solemn at this moment. Blood dripped from his clenched fist, which was trembling slightly. He was injured from the first exchange of blows. Qin Feng's face was very solemn. This was the strongest opponent he had ever encountered among his peers. "Not bad, your arm wasn't crippled after taking a blow from me, although I held back." The seventh prince smiled and attacked again. Qin Feng only saw a blur before the seventh prince's figure appeared on his left like a ghost. An extremely tyrannical force quickly attacked. Qin Feng turned around and put his arms in front of his chest. Bang! The seventh prince's golden fist hit Qin Feng's arms. As the muffled sound rang out, Qin Feng retreated explosively once again. The burning pain on his arm caused him to furrow his brows tightly. The seventh prince didn't use his full strength at all. Even so, he couldn't fight back. The gap between them was too big. Although it was a bit of a blow, Qin Feng couldn't deny that the imperial princes were indeed very strong. They were stronger than the 8 heavenly kings and the disciples of the heavenly palace. This wasn't a difference in realm, but a difference in combat strength among those of the same realm. The seventh prince suppressed his strength to the complete bone-strengthening realm. He only had a little more spirit-detecting realm comprehension, but he couldn't fight back. This showed how terrifying the imperial prince's combat strength was. He finally understood why the imperial princes didn't participate in the Heavenly King Challenge or the Sovereign Challenge. It was because once they fought, no one else could compete. "The current you, will you continue to be so stubborn?" The seventh prince stared at Qin Feng with interest as he smiled. "What I said earlier still counts. Let's talk about it again when you beat me down. Haha, you're really a tough nut to crack. Fine, I'll break your bones today." A gust of wind blew and golden light spread. Qin Feng's body flickered with crystalline light as he used the power of the spiritual outer coffin to engage in a fierce battle. The two of them fought very fiercely. It was a completely head-on fight without any fancy moves. On the ground, gravel continued to explode. Even huge rocks weighing several hundred kilograms were shattered by the shock waves from the exchange of blows between the two. Giant trees were broken, and sand and pebbles were sent flying. The two of them moved quickly. In just a few minutes, they had already exchanged dozens of blows. However, Qin Feng was clearly at a disadvantage. He was constantly pushed back, and the web between his thumb and forefinger was split open. Dragon Tiger Strangle. Qin Feng used the 10,000 Beast summoning technique. His left hand formed a tiger shadow, and the tiger's roar shook the forest. Executing the divine dragon art, an azure dragon appeared in his right hand, and the dragon's roar intimidated all beasts. The dragon came from the clouds, and the tiger came from the wind. The dragon and tiger surged as they attacked in a spiral. Seeing this, the seventh prince nodded slightly. He formed a seal with one hand, and a yellow bell appeared and enveloped him. Boom! The dragon and tiger charged forward. As they spun at high speed, they were even more powerful. They slammed heavily into the earthen yellow bell. One. There seemed to be a crisp sound of a bell ringing, and ripples appeared on the bell. However, what made Qin Feng's face fall was that his strongest attack could not break through his opponent's defense. "Now it's my turn to attack." As the dragon and tiger disappeared, the bell around the seventh prince dissipated as well. He looked at Qin Feng mockingly. Then, he formed a seal with both hands, and the spiritual energy between heaven and earth started to gather rapidly. His body moved without wind, and he slowly rose into the air. Quasi-heaven technique, golden light finger. When the energy gathered to a certain extent, the seventh prince suddenly pointed his finger, and golden light shone from his fingertip. A golden beam of light shot out from his fingertip, leaving a faint golden trace in the air. Qin Feng took a deep breath and formed a seal quickly. With a soft shout, a huge tortoise shadow appeared above him. Boom! The golden beam of light poured down like a torrent, heavily bombarding the tortoise shadow. The tortoise shadow shook violently, and the golden light flowed like lava. Crack! The ground under Qin Feng's feet cracked rapidly, and then it exploded. Rocks and soil shot out, and a huge pit was formed. The seventh prince looked at his masterpiece and nodded slightly. It can still take it? Looking at the deep pit filled with golden light, his eyes flickered slightly. The huge pit was laid horizontally, and the golden light was rampant. The aftermath turned into a golden shockwave, and wherever it spread, the earth and rocks were all shattered. The ground within a radius of 10 meters looked as if it had been plowed, and it was a mess. As the golden light gradually disappeared, the scene inside was exposed to the seventh prince's eyes. Its bones are indeed tough. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he said. His gaze landed on the huge pit, and the first thing he saw was the increasingly faint tortoise shadow, which was covered in cracks. Below it was Qin Feng, but his face was slightly pale, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that blocking this destructive attack had consumed a lot of his energy. With trembling hands, Qin Feng looked at the tortoise shadow that was gradually disappearing, and his eyes were slightly obscure. In the end, his strength was still too weak. From the beginning of the battle, he was at a disadvantage, and every time after that, he was suppressed and had no chance to fight back. The seventh prince floated down lightly, looked at Qin Feng and said, "If this is the basis of your arrogance, then today, I will completely destroy it." As he spoke, golden light rippled in his palm, releasing a tyrannical spiritual energy fluctuation. Qin Feng stared at him, and suddenly waved his hand, and the last golden talisman flew out. The seventh prince's face changed, and he quickly retreated. At the same time, a black stone shot out from his body and hit the talisman. Boom! In an instant, the two exploded, and the runes intertwined, and the spiritual energy went berserk, devouring and resisting each other. An incomparably tyrannical shockwave spread from the center. The two retreated at the same time, leaving the explosion area. In the end, the two forces dissipated at the same time. Spirit talisman, haha, if you like, let's play with this. But do you have any more? The seventh prince smiled, but his smile was cold. He flicked his finger, and another black stone shot out. At this moment, Qin Feng's pupils contracted, and his hair stood on end. He could clearly sense the terrifying power contained within the thumb-sized pebble. This kind of spirit talisman was not weaker than his. Qin Feng quickly retreated, and used the dragon's swimming body to increase his speed to the extreme. Boom! The black stone exploded 50 meters away from him. Poochie! Although Qin Feng tried his best to dodge, he was still hit by the impact, and his body flew horizontally, suffering a serious injury. What, you don't have any more spirit talismans on you? The seventh prince played with the black stone in his hand, and looked at Qin Feng mockingly. Then, he put away the black stone and laughed. I also don't want to use this method to deal with you. Qin Feng's face was gloomy. In terms of collecting all kinds of rare treasures, who could compare to the imperial family? His 3 spirit talismans might be a great thing for ordinary forces, but in the eyes of the imperial family, it was nothing. Not to mention that he had used 2 to deal with Su Tianbu. Even if he had not used one, he could not afford it. Chapter 242. A sudden helping hand. Qin Feng turned around and ran. If he continued to fight while being completely suppressed, his life would be in danger. A pair of light wings appeared on his back, bringing with it a gust of wind as he flew into the sky. Hee, do you think you can run away? Looking at Qin Feng, who was rapidly flying away, the seventh prince was not in a hurry. He waved his arm, and with a flash of light, a cassock with golden stripes appeared. The cassock flickered with a red light as it floated in the air. The seventh prince jumped on the cassock and poured his spiritual energy into it. The cassock emitted a red light and flew away quickly. After flying for some distance, Qin Feng did not even have time to breathe a sigh of relief before his expression changed again. He suddenly turned his head, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He saw the seventh prince standing on the cassock, speeding over and looking at him with a mocking expression. One relied on light wings to fly for a short period of time, while the other relied on a flying treasure. Their speed and endurance were not on the same level at all. Boom! The seventh prince caught up and punched out. Golden spiritual energy swept down like a flood. Qin Feng turned around, gathered all his strength, and punched the flood of spiritual energy. When the flood of spiritual energy was scattered, his light wings could not be maintained. His body staggered a few times in the air before finally tumbling and falling. After landing, Qin Feng did not stop. He slipped into the dense forest, and the spiritual energy in the purple bowl quickly enveloped him. His flying speed was obviously not as fast as the seventh prince. In the air, he could only become a live target. The only way was to stay in the forest, where there were many obstacles that could block him. The seventh prince wildly attacked in the air, and large areas of the mountain exploded. Giant trees were torn apart, and mountain rocks were shattered. Everywhere he passed, there was a scene of devastation. Qin Feng ran all the way to the west of the imperial capital. There was a large swamp there, shrouded in fog all year round. It was extremely dangerous inside. This was the second life-forbidden area in the primitive land, the Heavenly Forest Dead Swamp. Its degree of danger was not inferior to the Nine-Spirit Mountain Range. The seventh prince was very strong in all aspects and suppressed him in all aspects. He could not win or escape. He could only take the risk to enter the Heavenly Forest Dead Swamp, hoping to force the seventh prince to retreat. After half an hour of fleeing, Qin Feng gradually approached the Heavenly Forest Deserting Swamp. In front of them was a barren land. The air was humid and the ground had become much softer. The seventh prince also discovered Qin Feng's intention. His face immediately darkened and his attacks became fiercer. Obviously, he was also afraid of the Heavenly Forest's deserting swamp. He wanted to capture Qin Feng before they arrived at the swamp. He didn't want anything unexpected to happen. Hope was right in front of him. Qin Feng's spirit was lifted. He summoned his light wings again and flew toward the Heavenly Forest's dead swamp at lightning speed. Facing the seventh prince's increasingly fierce attacks, he mostly adopted a dodging posture. If he really couldn't dodge, he could only take it head-on. In the distance, marsh gas rose and shrouded the area in dense fog. Rumble! Suddenly, an even more powerful aura appeared. The seventh prince blocked in front of Qin Feng. At this moment, he used his full strength to prevent Qin Feng from rushing in. And upon seeing this scene, Qin Feng's expression turned extremely gloomy. The Heavenly Forest's deserting swamp was right before his eyes, but at this distance, it was the difference between life and death. He knew that it was almost impossible for him to barge through. The seventh prince wouldn't give him a chance either. Qin Feng's eyes flickered as he thought of a plan. However, all the ideas in his mind were eliminated. If the seventh prince didn't hold back, he would have no chance of winning. He clenched his fists tightly, and a sense of helplessness rose in his heart. A bitter expression appeared on his face. The difference in strength was too big, and he couldn't make up for it no matter what he did. I almost let you escape. The seventh prince stared coldly at Qin Feng. He threw out a palm, and a vigorous spiritual energy roared. It turned into a golden dragon and whizzed towards Qin Feng. Qin Feng circulated his spiritual energy, and the mental energy in his mind also burst out. It collided with the seventh prince's spiritual energy golden dragon, and in an instant, a spiritual energy storm rose. Poochie! Qin Feng staggered back, and blood spurted out from the corner of his mouth. He stretched out his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and a ferocious look appeared on his face. Since this is the case, I can only fight to the death. Even if I die today, I will peel off a layer of your skin. The seventh prince smiled in disdain at Qin Feng's words. He formed a seal with his hands, and golden light surged around his body. The metal energy between the heavens and the earth also rapidly gathered. Qin Feng also formed a seal with his hand. At this point, there was no need for him to hold back. Metal God Technique. The seventh prince shouted, and endless golden light shrouded him. The metal energy in front of him was like a cluster of golden flames, and it was filled with a heart-palpitating power. Suddenly, the seventh prince's eyes narrowed, and he stared at Qin Feng. To be precise, he stared at his hands that were forming seals. This kind of seal. He squinted his eyes, and his gaze was almost engraved on Qin Feng's hands. Every change in the seal affected every nerve in his heart. Whoosh, whoosh. The metal energy in the sky wandered over, making a rustling sound. On the other side, the fire was burning, and it was as if it was going to burn the sky. Fire God Technique, Water God Technique. When he saw the endless metal energy of water and metal energy, the seventh prince's pupils shrank, and he shouted almost subconsciously, Qin Feng, hand over the 5 elements technique, and I can guarantee on my reputation as a prince that I will spare your life. Your reputation is worthless in front of me. Qin Feng coldly snorted as he pushed his palms forward. The metal energy of water and metal energy turned into 2 giant pythons, and each of them carried a terrifying power as they rushed forward. Sizzle! Water and metal energy were originally incompatible, and at this moment, Qin Feng forcefully stuck them together, and suddenly a large amount of white smoke rose. You're courting death! The seventh prince shouted angrily, and the metal energy vibrated out, turning into a giant golden python, and fiercely collided with the metal energy of water and metal energy. In an instant, the metal energy, and metal energy exploded at the same time. The 3 giant pythons were entangled together, biting, resisting, and devouring each other, causing a strong wind to blow and sand to fly. Bang! When the energy gradually dissipated, the seventh prince suddenly flew out, and his golden hand grabbed at Qin Feng. Roar! The tiger roar shook the forest, and Qin Feng had already prepared the fierce tiger array. The fierce tiger was used for killing, and its combat power was unparalleled. At the same time, a giant turtle shell appeared above, resisting the seventh prince's attack. Wait until I catch you, and I'll personally check your mind. The seventh prince stared at Qin Feng with a fiery gaze, and then smiled coldly. He stretched out his hand and directly grabbed at the fierce tiger array. Boom! Boom! However, at this moment, a red light suddenly appeared, and blasted at the seventh prince's back. Wherever it passed, even the space was left with a faint red mark. A heart-palpitating fluctuation burst out from the red light. On the other side, a long spear appeared, and it came horizontally. White smoke rose around it, and it could not be seen clearly. However, at the tip of the spear, the space was distorted, and the air was constantly exploding. A terrifying fluctuation of spiritual energy rippled out. 2 figures appeared at the same time. One was covered in red light, and the other was covered in white light. Both of them could not be seen clearly, but the aura that burst out at this moment was shocking. God-slaying arrow! Sky-slaughtering spear! The seventh prince's face suddenly changed, and the spiritual energy around him exploded. He suddenly opened his hands and shouted, Emperor's Bell! Roar! At the same time, the fierce tiger roared, and with the might of 100 beasts, it roared out. Chapter 243. The strongest trio. No one had expected that all 4 of them would be momentarily stunned. Qin Feng did not expect that 2 helpers would appear at this most critical moment. Moreover, both of them were extremely powerful. Most importantly, he did not notice them at all, and they suddenly attacked. The seventh prince hadn't expected that when he was about to use all of his power to catch Qin Feng, someone would launch a sneak attack from behind. Moreover, there were two of them at once. From the strength of the attack, it didn't seem like they had reached the spirit detecting realm, but the power contained in the attack caused all the pores on his body to shrink. Similarly, the two people who launched the surprise attack also paused for a moment. Clearly, they did not expect that there would actually be someone who had the same goal as them, which was to kill the seventh prince. They had been following him in secret all this while, intending to make a move at the most crucial moment. However, they didn't expect that there would be someone else, and they didn't notice the other party at all. God-slaying arrow. Sky-slaughtering spear. Heaven Emperor bell. Heaven-devouring finger. This pause only lasted for a moment. Soon after, the four of them reacted and each of them unleashed an extremely powerful attack. Rumble. This place was boiling with energy explosions. Ferocious shock waves spread out one after another, causing the energy of heaven and earth to go berserk. It was as if the heavens were collapsing and the earth was splitting apart. The air continued to explode and escape. The space was distorted to the extreme, forming a vacuum zone. 1. A terrifying shock wave erupted from the center of the explosion, and Qin Feng and the other two were sent flying. As the energy gradually dissipated, a broken bell slowly appeared in front of the three of them. At this moment, the seventh prince cut a sorry figure. There were many scratches on the big bell, and there were even a few holes that were emitting astonishing energy fluctuations. Bloody holes had appeared on his shoulders and right arm, and fresh blood was gushing out from them. His eyes were overcast, and there was a bit of shock on his face. Who was he? He had received the best nurturing since he was young, and his bones were the most powerful. He could completely dominate others at the same level. However, at this moment, he was injured while defending with all his strength. Moreover, his opponents were actually three people who hadn't stepped into this realm yet. This made him feel humiliated, and at the same time, a cold, killing intent was born. In the past, it had always been the princes who fought against their superiors. No one would ever go against them. But today, this rule had been broken by him. It's him. Qin Feng's eyes, and Qin Feng's Heaven Emperor bells, Heaven Emperor bells, Heaven Emperor bell, Heaven Emperor bell, Heavens, Heaven Emperor bell. Jing Wui, the nouveau riche who wore golden gongs and satin and always liked to look around lecherously, no longer had his wretched aura. His whole body emitted a fierce aura, like an unsheathed sword, bringing with it an incomparably sharp feeling. The other person was dressed in black, and his age was about the same as theirs. His face was as sharp as a knife, emitting a chilly aura. His eyes were pitch black and deep, and his gaze was reserved. He held a long spear in his hand, causing him to look like a god of war, emitting an extremely fierce battle intent. Who? Heaven who? Qin Feng secretly focused. He knew Jing Wui and had some understanding of him. He said that he wanted to shoot down the sun, and now it seemed that he was shooting down the scorching sun of the imperial capital. However, he did not recognize the black-clothed young man at all. Since he had attacked the seventh prince, it was obvious that he was not from the imperial capital, nor was he from the Saint Ryuan. In that case, he could only be someone from another part of the primitive land. They were about the same age as him, but they didn't have the support of the Saint Ryuan like him, yet they were able to reach this level. It was clear that these two were very powerful. Both of them were half a step into the spirit-channeling realm. If they could injure the seventh prince, it was clear that they were not ordinary half a step into the spirit-channeling realm. As for their origins, Qin Feng didn't have time to think too much about it. In short, they just needed to follow him. The seventh prince coldly swept his gaze over the three of them. He slowly withdrew his spirit force and a cruel smile appeared on his face. Good, very good. To be able to produce such young experts under the imperial capital suppression, this is our mistake. However, it's time to end this mistake. At the same time, his heart was slightly shaken. To be able to injure him with just half a step into the spirit channeling realm, this kind of talent was definitely not something an ordinary person could possess. Moreover, from his point of view, these two people were even more of a threat than Qin Feng. The students of the Saint Ryuin could not be too strong. After all, they had a strong foundation. However, these two had nothing and had relied on themselves to reach this level. If these kinds of people were not killed, they would definitely become a disaster in the future. At this moment, the seventh prince's heart was filled with killing intent. Killing you? I also have the same intention, the black-clothed young man said. His tone was very calm without any fluctuations. Today, I will truly shoot down the sun. Jing Wui let out a cold snort as the blood-red spirit force around him trembled. He looked at Qin Feng, then at the young man, and laughed. It seems like I'm not the only one on the path to shooting down the sun. There are others with me. Boom. Qin Feng used the Divine Emperor's aura, and his aura instantly entered half a step into the spirit channeling realm. The roars of dragons and tigers continued to come from his body. The tiger formation above him trembled. Kill! There was nothing much to say. At this point, there was only one word to say: battle. Only by killing the other party or being killed by the other party would this battle end. The seventh prince also understood this point. His spirit force swept out without holding back and turned into a golden wave that crazily swept the three of them in. Within the golden wave there were three powerful auras that erupted. The black-clothed young man's body erupted with a white light that looked like flames. Jing Wui was surrounded by the color of blood. It was like a sea of blood. As it churned, a strong smell of blood spread out. Black spirit force surged around Qin Feng. Sometimes it turned into a tiger, sometimes it turned into a dragon as it crazily attacked. The battle between the four of them instantly entered a state of incandescence. Extremely fierce spirit force fluctuations constantly spread out from the battle between the four of them. Everywhere it passed, rocks would shatter and the earth would crack. Qin Feng had used the Divine Emperor's aura to enter half a step into the spirit channeling realm. With the help of the other two, he could directly face off against the seventh prince. He even had the upper hand. The seventh prince's expression was dark as he continued to exchange blows with the three of them. His heart trembled. The three of them were too powerful, and even he felt numb from the shockwaves. If it wasn't for his body being tempered, he would have already lost. With a whoosh, he took out a black stone and threw it at the black-clothed young man. Careful! Qin Feng's expression changed. He didn't expect the seventh prince to use a spirit seal at this time. The black-clothed young man's expression also changed. He quickly retreated and took out a stone bead and threw it over. Boom! A terrifying shockwave erupted and the four of them were sent flying. You actually also have a spirit seal? The seventh prince revealed a shocked expression. This person wasn't in Saint Ryuin, nor was he in the capital. How could he have a spirit seal of this level? This kind of spirit seal required at least a heaven-rank spirit master to refine, and it was impossible for there to be such a spirit master in the outside world. Since you like to play this game, I'll play with you. Jing Wui sneered. Chapter 244. The Fall of the Prince. Even Qin Feng was shocked. Where did these two guys come from? When he was at Saint Ryuin, he had only taken out 3 spiritual seals of this level. But from the looks of it, these two seemed to have a lot of them. Jing Wui waved his hand, and the same stone bead appeared, bursting forth with powerful spiritual energy. The seventh prince hurriedly took out a black stone and threw it over, causing a huge explosion. Haha, it seems that this friend has also visited the Jin clan. Jing Wui laughed heartily. Was this stolen from the Jin clan? Qin Feng stared blankly for a moment, then immediately sighed inwardly at the courage of these two people. They actually dared to steal from the Jin clan, and this kind of spiritual seal at that. He didn't know what to say. The seventh prince's hanging hands trembled slightly. He was angry. The other party was obviously mocking him on purpose. So what if the imperial capital was high and mighty? Didn't they come and go as they pleased? He put away the spiritual talisman in his hand. He no longer had the upper hand in the battle of treasures. Although he still had a lot of spiritual talismans in his Qianquan bag, he didn't know how many these two people had stolen, so he didn't dare to use them casually. Looks like I'll still have to rely on my own strength, he muttered. With a flip of his palm, golden light flickered, and a purple-gold broadsword appeared in his hand. This saber was 3 feet long and the blade was as wide as a palm. The hilt was made of pure gold and the tip of the saber was inlaid with a round golden beast core. The blade was not sharp. On the contrary, it was very rough. However, there were many brands on the blade. Those brands were faintly purple in color. Purple light flickered, making the saber look even more extraordinary. The blade was thick and blunt, but it exuded an incomparably sharp aura. Dragon-slaying god-slaying saber. Looking at the seventh prince's treasured saber that was emitting a purple light, Qin Feng's expression became extremely grave. As for the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber, there was no one who did not know about it. It was extremely baleful and powerful. It was said that thousands of years ago, this saber had slaughtered a dragon and was stained with dragon blood. The most frightening thing about this saber was not its tyrannical power, but its murderous aura that could invade one's mind. Especially for a spirit master, it was simply a destructive weapon. For thousands of years, this saber had killed countless powerful spirit beasts and human powerhouses. It had been stained with the blood of too many powerhouses. As a result, the saber's murderous aura was extremely heavy, causing great harm to one's spiritual power. What a spirit master was most proud of was their extraordinary spiritual power. Once it was eroded, it would be a terrible disaster. Qin Feng stared at the seventh prince with a solemn expression. The power in his body was circulating rapidly, and he was ready to deal with it at any time. You should be proud that you made me use this blade. The seventh prince smiled sinisterly at Qin Feng. Then, he slowly raised the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber and slashed down at him. Suddenly, the black chi surged like a demonic fog. It carried a terrifying murderous aura as it whizzed towards Qin Feng. The 100 calamity heaven-devouring incantation circulated quickly, and the devouring power erupted. At the same time, he used the 10,000 beast summoning technique. All kinds of beast phantoms roared and charged at the black gas, causing it to shake violently. Boom! All of a sudden, Qin Feng's expression changed. An invisible force covered his face, and he was unable to block it. Buzz! Buzz! That force invaded his mind and tore at his spiritual power. Qin Feng's body shook and his body slowed down. His spiritual power was eroded by the murderous aura, and his eyes instantly turned scarlet. His face was ferocious, and he kept growling. He felt that his control over his spiritual power was getting weaker, and he could clearly feel that his pure spiritual power was being contaminated. When the seventh prince saw this, a cold smile appeared on his face. He did not know how long it took him to get the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber from his father. Fortunately, the power that it had unleashed was satisfactory. Boom! At the critical moment, the white spear radiance attacked and shrouded Qin Feng. At the same time, a pure force spread throughout his body, causing him to become more irritable. His mind gradually calmed down. Supreme purification! The young man in the sturdy robe shouted. The white radiance surged and vibrated with strands of holy light. With a strange power, it purified all the murderous aura that had entered Qin Feng's mind. Thank you. Qin Feng calmed down and smiled at the young man in the sturdy robe. The young man did not say anything. he turned and charged at the seventh prince. His long spear vibrated, and rays of spear radiance tore through the air, launching a powerful attack. I can't fall behind either. Qin Feng also charged forward. He did not dare to use his spiritual power anymore. He hid in the spiritual coffin. Just like how a spiritual power master countered spiritual beasts, the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber countered a spiritual power master. He took out his stone axe and joined the battle. The four of them were furious, and their killing intent was overflowing. With the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber, the seventh prince's combat strength increased greatly. Every ray of sword radiance carried a terrifying murderous aura. However, Qin Feng and the other two were also fighting with all their might. Spiritual power gushed out from their bodies, and the whole place was boiling. The overflowing energy left shocking marks on the ground. In the end, all four of them were injured. Blood purgatory slash. Suddenly, Jing Wui took out a butcher's knife and approached the seventh prince abruptly. He waved the butcher's knife, and a scarlet ray of light shot out and smashed into the seventh prince's back. His attack was too sudden. Previously, his spiritual power had decreased too quickly, and everyone thought that he was seriously injured. They did not expect that he was secretly preparing a big move. Overlord's spear. At the same time, the sturdy robed young man stabbed out with his spear. A ray of spear radiance shot out and hit the seventh prince's dragon-slaying god-slaying saber, sending it flying. Qin Feng, quick! The young man shouted. Roar! Qin Feng used his left hand to capture the dragon and his right hand to hold the tiger. The dragon and tiger surged out. At the same time, his spiritual power formed the fierce tiger array and roared out. Whoosh! 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 Almost at the same time, the power of water and fire spread out and attacked the seventh prince's body. Poochie! The seventh prince suffered a heavy blow. Even if he hurriedly used the Emperor Bell, it was not enough. He was sent flying by Qin Feng. Heaven-devouring finger! When he was sent flying, Qin Feng, Jing Wui, and the young man did not dare to stay idle. They wanted to take his life while he was weak. This was the best time to kill the seventh prince. The three of them were not easy to deal with. They knew that it was not easy to create this opportunity. Almost at the same time, they used all of their spiritual power to release their strongest attacks. Rumble! The three terrifying attacks landed on the seventh prince's body. Even if he was at his peak, he could barely take on such an attack. At this moment, he suffered a heavy blow, and the spiritual power around his body withered. It's over, seventh prince. A cold and emotionless voice suddenly sounded out, and the seventh prince immediately shuddered. Just as he was about to retreat, his body suddenly stopped. His body had been locked on by someone. At the same time, Qin Feng held the stone axe, Jing Wui raised the pig-slaughtering knife, and the sturdy robed young man held the long spear. They either chopped or stabbed, and all of them landed on the seventh prince's body. This was the killing blow of the three of them. Even if I die, I will not let you have it easy. Just you wait. You will be chased by the imperial capital endlessly. The seventh prince stared at Qin Feng with hatred. He knew that he was done for. He did not even have the chance to escape. Before his life force disappeared, he lightly pointed his finger, and a beam of light shot into the dragon-slaying god-slaying knife. Boom! His body suddenly collapsed, and his aura disappeared. Chapter 245. The sun-shooting trio. The moment the seventh prince's body fell, the dragon-slaying god-slaying blade vibrated, and a purple-gold light engulfed the seventh prince's body. This scene was so sudden that Qin Feng and the other two did not react in time. Of course, even if they did, they would not chase after the seventh prince. This was the dragon-slaying god-slaying blade's instinct to protect its owner. This kind of killing weapon had been stained with the blood of too many strong warriors. If the seventh prince was able to use its power, the three of them would be dead now. It's a pity that he lost all his treasures. Jing Wei grimaced in pain. At this moment, he had returned to his usual wretched self, feeling extremely regretful. Qin Feng also had the same thought. He had no idea how many treasures the seventh prince had, but it was definitely enough to shock them. Not to mention the other treasures, just the unknown number of spiritual seals and the flying treasure were enough to make people jealous. However, this regret only lasted for a moment and then disappeared. Even if he left it behind, he might not dare to take it. The Jin clan's bronze mirror had almost exposed him. Who knew if the seventh prince had such a thing on him? If this news reached the ears of the imperial capital's emperor, then it would be terrible. Many thanks to the two of you this time around. Qin Feng smiled as he stared at the two of them. Haha, brother, you're too polite. I'm not helping you. Jing Wei looked up and smiled. As the descendant of Ho Yi, shooting the sun is my duty. But this friend, you look very unfamiliar. I don't know where you come from. Jing Wei looked at the well-dressed young man with a smile. His peach blossom eyes were extremely charming. Qin Feng also looked at him. He wanted to know where such an outstanding person came from and what kind of background he had. Tan Xian of the Tan family. The well-dressed young man smiled faintly. Tan Xian, you're Tan Xian? Ha ha ha, as expected, I should have guessed. Only you. Jing Wei was stunned for a moment, then he laughed. Qin Feng was slightly puzzled. Brother, you don't know that this Tan Xian was an extraordinary figure in the imperial city a few years ago. He was the only person who could compete with the princes of the imperial family at a young age. He was known as the #1 genius in the imperial city, but the Tan family hid it very well. Most people don't know what Tan Xian looks like. Seeing that Qin Feng was puzzled, Jing Wei said with a smile, if the Tan clan hadn't been exterminated by the imperial clan, the three young supremes would have been obedient grandsons in front of him. Hearing this, Qin Feng was shocked. This Tan Xian actually had such a big history. Was he originally from the imperial capital? Tan Xian's achievements would have been immeasurable if the Tan family hadn't been wiped out and their entire clan had been wiped out. What a pity. Jing Wei shook his head slightly and sighed. It was rumored that you were already dead. I didn't expect you to still be alive. His gaze was somewhat complicated as he said, we didn't find your corpse back then, so we guessed this. I didn't expect you to still be alive. However, your current actions are considered a complete betrayal of the imperial capital. The ancestors of the Tan clan were originally slaves. There's no such thing as betrayal. Tan Xian's voice was penetrating to the bone. His gaze vaguely glanced at Jing Wei. He was silent for a moment, then he said in a soft voice, I saw that your moves were inclined to the dark side. Moreover, they were decisive and ruthless. Your figure was erratic, and your attacks caught people off guard. If I'm not wrong, you should be a member of an assassin's organization. Qin Feng looked at Jing Wei with great interest. He was full of curiosity about this person who always disguised himself as a pervert. Now that he was involved, Jing Wei didn't hide it anymore. He shrugged and said in a relaxed tone, You have sharp eyes. I am indeed a member of an assassin's organization. Assassin's organizations are usually hidden in the dark. Very few people can see the true face of this organization. Moreover, this organization usually doesn't participate in the struggles of various clans and powers. They only accept missions. As long as the reward is enough, they dare to act against anyone. I'm very curious. Who is it and how much reward can they offer for you to act against a prince of the imperial family? Tan Xian said with a smile that wasn't a smile. No one can afford this. Shaking his head, Jing Wei said, In our line of work, there's a rule. That is, the target's own strength or the power behind him must be within the scope of the assassin's organization. Once this limit is exceeded, no matter how much reward is offered, it won't be accepted. What do you think of the imperial family's weight? Tan Xian smiled slightly. If the target is the imperial family, no one can afford such a reward. The Assassins' organization definitely won't accept this mission. If that's the case, why did you act against the imperial family? Qin Feng thought for a while and speculated, could it be that this Assassins' organization was also destroyed by the imperial family? No, I've been hiding here for the past few years. I've never heard of it. Tan Xian shook his head. Although you're here, what you see is just a performance. The Assassins' organization hasn't been destroyed, but it's only in name. Jing Wui's lowered eyes flashed with a touch of darkness. My master, 3 martial uncles, and the top 10 assassins in the organization are all dead. The Assassins' organization has now become a puppet of the imperial family. What? Tan Xian was shocked. Qin Feng wasn't from the imperial capital, so he didn't understand the power structure here. However, he was different. His ancestors had long gotten rid of their slave status because of their great contributions. They lived in the imperial capital and founded the Tan's Gate. He had always lived in the imperial capital, so he had some understanding of this unusually mysterious organization. The Assassins' organization had existed for many years. If one traced back to its origin, it was probably even older than the Tan's Gate and the Jin clan. Moreover, they were very mysterious. No one had seen the true face of this organization since ancient times, nor did they know the scale of this organization. Even though there were many similar assassins' organizations later on, they couldn't be compared to this organization. However, such a huge change had happened to this organization. It seems that the imperial family has made a move against the assassins' organization. They never participate in the struggles of other forces, but they've made a move against you. I'm afraid they have some ulterior motives. Tan Xian whispered. The Tan's destruction may not be as simple as it seems on the surface. Jing Wui said, not long after your Tan's destruction, the Assassins' organization encountered an unforeseen event. This can't be a coincidence. Tan Xian nodded, his dark eyes flashing. First the Tan's Gate, then the Assassins' organization. The imperial family was about to make a big move. No wonder you hate the imperial family so much. Tan Xian sighed softly. This Jing Wui's experience was somewhat similar to his. Aren't you the same? Jing Wui shook his head and smiled. You refuse to leave. Aren't you looking for an opportunity to take revenge? In this regard, Tan Xian said calmly, the hatred of the extermination of my clan is irreconcilable. Ha ha, you and I are the same. You killed my sister and destroyed my master. In this life, I'll spend my life with the imperial family. Jing Wui smiled vulgarly. He was carefree, but anyone could hear the cold, killing intent in his words. Tan Xian nodded. Under his calm eyes, there was a crazy hatred surging. Just like you, I'll spend my life with the imperial family. As long as I'm alive, they'll never have peace. Chapter 246. Tiger Riders Attack. I don't want to get involved. Although I also want to shoot down the sun, our methods are different, and our paths are different. Qin Feng quickly waved his hand. What kind of joke was this? If he were to fight to the death with the royal family here, sooner or later, he would fall into a trap. What he wanted to destroy was not only the royal family, but also the inhumane slavery system that shrouded the entire primitive land. Sigh. What a bummer. Jing Wui looked at Qin Feng and said, You killed the 7th prince with us. This enmity is irreconcilable. Will the imperial family let you go? Qin Feng shrugged. Who would know that we did it? The 7th prince is a spirit-detecting expert. They'll definitely suspect Saint Ryuan or some other expert. There's no way they'll suspect me. After saying that, he quickly warned, Don't drag me down with you. It's just a coincidence that we're working together. We're not on the same side. He didn't want to fight to the death with these two lunatics. Qin Feng looked in the direction of the Saint Ryuan and softly muttered to himself, Soon, the heavenly road will open and I should leave. I don't want to be hunted down here. Jing Wui pursed his lips. Although he was a little disappointed that Qin Feng did not join, he would not force him to join. Everyone had their own choices. Since that's the case, let's part ways here. As Tan Xian spoke, he looked at Qin Feng, paused for a moment and said in a low voice, "Our paths are different, but the 3,000 paths of the Great Tao all lead to the same destination. Our ultimate goal is still the same. I hope you can successfully ascend the path of heaven and plead for the people of the world." "I will do my best." Qin Feng cupped his fists solemnly. "Goodbye. Ha. It's time for me to carry out the next step of my plan. I'm going to King harm a few princesses, Infanta or something." Qin Feng's mouth twitched as he watched the two of them leave. In the end, he didn't say anything. He wanted them to not lay their hands on the 9th princess, but on second thought, what right did he have to make such a request? Both of them were burdened with a blood feud, and the enemy was the royal family. He had no right to ask them to be lenient on the road to revenge because of their personal relationship. This was the sad part of their relationship. He was a slave who went against the royal family, while she and her family were the targets of all the slaves who were still struggling in the sea of bitterness. Xian Yuanao was right. He should not continue to be entangled with her. Otherwise, it would not be good for either of them. Of course, Qin Feng did not think that they had the ability to harm the 9th princess. If it was that easy, the royal family would not live up to its name. "Goodbye, I hope we can meet again." He sighed and turned to leave. However, not long after he left, Tan Xian and Jing Wui quickly returned. The latter shouted, "Hey, you, what are you doing?" Qin Feng did not have time to react. An extremely terrifying aura quickly closed in on him. He quickly turned around and saw Tan Xian and Jing Wui rushing over. Behind them, several figures appeared, and a terrifying aura emanated from them. Tiger Knight, 3 White Rank Wolf Rider. Qin Feng's pupils contracted. He did not expect there to be such pursuers. The weakest of the Purple Wolf Knight was at the bone-strengthening realm. As for the White Rank Wolf Rider, needless to say, it was at least at the spirit-detecting realm. The most terrifying thing was that there was a Tiger Knight riding a black tiger at the front. That aura was so terrifying that it was probably at the heaven realm. A Tiger Knight was even more terrifying than a Wolf Rider. From a certain point of view, a Tiger Knight was transferred from a White Rank Wolf Rider. Only the top White Rank Wolf Rider had the qualifications to be promoted to a Tiger Knight. Moreover, before becoming a Tiger Knight, each person had to single-handedly tame a tiger-shaped spirit beast at the peak of the late stage of the 4th rank. Each of them had the strength to kill a spirit beast at the late stage of the spirit-detecting realm. Therefore, whether it was individual combat ability or overall strength, a Tiger Knight could be considered the most elite soldiers in the imperial capital. They were the true powerhouses. Of course, this type of soldier could no longer be considered a type of soldier. Normally, they would not go to the battlefield. They would stay in the imperial capital to protect some important people. For example, the 7th uncle by the 9th princess side. If it was not for the fact that the 9th princess wanted to train herself and did not allow him to follow her, he probably would not have had the chance to meet the 9th princess. A Tiger Knight and 3 White Rank Wolf Rider. If they really faced them head-on, their opponents would be able to crush them in one go. Qin Feng did not even think about it. He immediately retreated to the edge of the Heavenly Forest's deserting swamp, intending to charge in. At this moment, Tan Xian and Jing Wui had also arrived. They could enter at any time. They had no way to resist the strength of this group of people, so they could only enter the Heavenly Forest's deserting swamp. "Who are you two? If you have nothing to do, then scram." The Tiger Knight coldly looked at Tan Xian and Jing Wui, then cast his gaze on Qin Feng. "I only want this person." "Oh, big brother, you should have said so earlier. You scared us for nothing." When Jing Wui heard this, A wretched smile appeared on his face. Big brothers, don't worry. We have nothing to do with this Saint Ryuin person. Qin Feng's face immediately darkened. Damn it, they had just joined hands to kill the seventh prince. How could they not recognize him? However, since he had said so, he did not intend to expose them. After all, they were no match for the other party. Rather than the three of them being forced into the heavenly forest's deserting swamp, he would rather go alone. You are not Saint Ryuin people, but you have such talent. You can enter the imperial capital and achieve great things. I can recommend you. The imperial capital has always cherished talents, the Tiger Knight said. That's great. Jing Wui shouted happily. His peach blossom eyes narrowed into slits. He excitedly said, I have long wanted to enter the imperial capital and contribute my meager strength. Now that I have Sir's recommendation, it is truly a blessing from the heavens. The Tiger Knight slightly nodded. Just as he was about to let the two leave, his eyes filled with suspicion. What's going on? Why do I sense the aura of someone from the imperial capital? Hearing this, Qin Feng, Tan Xian, and Jing Wui's faces twitched. The seventh prince had just died not long ago, so it was easy for someone as strong as the Tiger Knight to sense his aura. Although they were not sure of his identity, they should be able to sense the aura of someone from the imperial capital. It is indeed the aura of an expert from the imperial capital, a white-rank wolf rider said. Speak, why do I sense the aura of an expert from the imperial capital? Has someone been here before? The Tiger Knight's eyes emitted a cold light as he stared at Qin Feng and the other two. We don't know either. Jing Wui braced himself to explain. In the end, he could not make up any more lies. He shouted, It was that person who wanted to kill me. I took care of him while I was at it. What can you do about it? Tiger Knight and the others were stunned by his sudden change in attitude. He was like a shrew cursing on the street. You killed someone from the imperial capital. You deserve to die. The Tiger Knight panted heavily as he coldly stared at the three. So what if I killed him? Jing Wui stuck out his chest and shouted, Not only did I want to kill him, but I also want to harm the imperial capital. You even want to go to the palace to harm your princess. Princess, what can you do to me? If you have the ability, come in and kill me. Chapter 247. Entering the Heavenly Forest Dead Swamp. There's a lot of poisonous gas in the swamp. Not to mention minor Heaven Realm experts, even 9th level Heaven Realm experts can die if they're careless. How dare you enter with your strength? Tiger Knight shouted coldly. F***ck your grandpa. Your grandpa dares to go in. If you have the guts, come in as well. Yours truly will fight you all to the death inside. Jing Wui rushed into the fog without stopping. Tiger Knight and the others were so angry that their chests were about to explode. Let's go in as well. Qin Feng and Tan Xian looked at each other and rushed into the Heavenly Forest's death swamp without hesitation. The Tiger Knight's eyes were gloomy as he watched the three disappear in front of him. Wait for me outside and prevent them from escaping. He hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and charged in as well. In the swamp, there was thick fog everywhere and visibility was very low. From time to time, there would be ripples in the water below. Obviously, there were high-grade retail stores in those places. Qin Feng and the other two were very cautious when they entered this place. None of them dared to land on the ground. They slowed down and scanned their surroundings with sharp eyes. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air came from behind, and golden light filled the air. The Tiger Knight attacked. Golden light tore through the thick fog and rushed over. Qin Feng and the other two quickly dodged. They didn't want to face him head-on. If they really couldn't dodge, then they would join forces to face him head-on. Here, the Tiger Knight was very restrained. He didn't dare to use too much force, fearing that something unexpected would happen. Otherwise, how could Qin Feng and the others block his attack? The Heavenly Forest's deserting swamp was a forbidden zone for humans. It was no weaker than the Nine Spirits mountain range. No matter how confident he was still wary of this place. Qin Feng punched the water below, instantly causing a large wave to splash. After throwing out a punch, he quickly ran away without looking back. Whoosh! Whoosh! The water below was impacted and violently tumbled. One after another, small black snakes burst forth and enveloped the tiger knights that had entered this area. Bastards, I'll definitely kill you! The tiger knight naturally saw Qin Feng's actions and immediately roared in exasperation. Countless small black snakes shot out from below like arrows, emitting a sharp aura. The tiger knight looked coldly at Qin Feng and the other two who had disappeared into the distance. He let out a low roar, and his powerful spiritual energy turned into a large bell, blocking the small black snakes. While resisting the attacks of the black snakes, the bell was also operating, crushing all the small snake. He sped across the swamp. However, after he broke through the black snake's encirclement, he had completely lost track of Qin Feng and the other two. The little black snake's attack power couldn't cause him any harm, but they had the advantage of numbers, slowing down his speed. Humph! Those who have been targeted by me, even if you have 10 lives, it's useless. With a cold snort, the tiger knight flipped his palm and a longan-sized crystal ball flashed out. He held the crystal ball and moved it in several directions. Only in the east, the crystal ball shone the brightest. He actually circled behind me? The tiger knight was slightly stunned, but he immediately reacted and sneered. What a good plan! But do you think you can escape like this? There are people waiting for you outside. He didn't rush back. He wanted to let them get out of the Heavenly Forest deserting swamp and then cut off their escape route. At that time, it would be easy to torture them. These three can't be left alive. He had never taken the strength of Qin Feng and the other two seriously and didn't see them as a threat. However, this kind of scheming made him tremble in fear. They lured him in. When he thought that they wanted to use the dangerous environment of the Heavenly Forest deserting swamp to force him to retreat, they left first. He had always thought that Qin Feng was forced into a desperate situation by him and had to take the risk to break in. If it weren't for the guidance of the crystal ball, he might have continued to search inside. Being able to maintain a calm and collected state of mind after being forced into a desperate situation, this kind of person was the most terrifying. Perhaps even the Tiger Knight himself wouldn't have thought of such a strategy under such circumstances. We shouldn't be too far away from the outside now. Landing on a relatively dry and hard ground, Qin Feng looked ahead. But there are still 3 white rank wolf rider outside. We can't get out at all, Tan Xian said in a deep voice. After they left the Tiger Knight's sight, they took a detour and returned. However, they didn't rush out immediately. Instead, they waited. The other 3 white rank wolf rider couldn't hold back anymore. However, after waiting for a while, they didn't seem to have any intention of coming in. I think we should make some noise and lure them in, Jingwei said. The 3 of them discussed for a while, and kept making noise at the edge of the swamp. However, the 3 white rank wolf rider didn't move. They didn't even show any signs of going forward to check. They have iron discipline. The Tiger Knight must have ordered them to stay here, afraid that we will return, Tan Xian said. The 3 of them looked a little gloomy. If that was the case, they could only go deeper into the Heavenly Forest deserting swamp. However, just as they were about to leave, a golden beam of light suddenly attacked from the side. The appearance of the beam of light was too sudden. When Qin Feng and the other 2 reacted, the attack had already arrived in front of them. The 3 of their faces suddenly changed. They raised their fists and punched. Powerful spiritual energy erupted like a volcano, surging violently. During the collision, visible air waves swept out. Even the surrounding poisonous gas was forcibly dispersed. Bang! The Tiger Knight's attack was very lethal. In a hurry, Qin Feng and the other two were blown away, coughing up blood from the corner of their mouth. After tumbling a few times in the air, Qin Feng barely managed to stabilize himself. He summoned his light wings to avoid falling into the swamp below. At the same time, the light wings curled, dragging Tan Xian and Jing Wui. Qin Feng's eyes flashed with surprise. How did the Tiger Knight know that they had returned? In fact, if it weren't for the fact that they hadn't gone out, the Tiger Knight wouldn't have attacked so quickly. He was also helpless. He didn't dare to use his full strength here. He wanted to wait for Qin Feng and the other two to go out before making a move. However, the three of them had been here for a long time and didn't move. He couldn't wait any longer and had no choice but to attack. Are you surprised? Looking at Qin Feng's expression, the Tiger Knight sneered. The royal family's methods are not something you lowly slaves can imagine. Qin Feng and the other two's faces were ugly. They had underestimated the royal family's methods. The other party must have a tracking magic treasure. Otherwise, it would be impossible to determine their location in such a short time. In the face of absolute strength, any tricks are useless. The Tiger Knight didn't talk nonsense and charged forward. Qin Feng's eyes flashed. After a moment, a fierce light flashed. In that case, let's see who's more afraid of death. He turned around and ran with the other two, rushing deeper into the swamp. At first, he had wanted to trick them into coming in, and then the three of them would sneak out. After all, the Heavenly Forest's deserting swamp was known as a forbidden zone for human life. He didn't doubt the degree of danger inside. But now, it seemed that this plan had lost its effect. In this case, they could only fight with their lives on the line. Qin Feng ran wildly all the way, attacking from time to time to attract the spirit beasts here. This time, the three of them didn't hide. They were even very arrogant. It seemed that they wouldn't stop until they made a big scene. The Tiger Knight's eyes were gloomy. He followed closely behind and kept attacking. He was also angry. Wasn't it just a competition of courage? Chapter 248. Tower of Darkness. Several figures, one in front and one behind, flew into the depths of the fog. Along the way, the roars of beasts could be heard continuously. Many spirit beasts were lured out and attacked them. However, their levels were too low, so they couldn't obstruct them. Gradually, Qin Feng and the other two's faces turned ugly. In the swamp, many places were filled with poisonous gas and poisonous insects. They passed through 2 areas with poisonous gas, and the poisonous gas invaded their bodies, corroding his flesh and blood. Although the poisonous gas could be suppressed, the deeper one went, the more powerful the poisonous gas became. At that time, they would probably be poisoned to death, even without the Tiger Knights making a move. Haha! You can't hold on any longer. Seeing Qin Feng slow down, the Tiger Knight sneered. He had the poison prevention pill and the poison release armor, so he could ignore the poisonous gas for a short period of time. Qin Feng did not pay attention to him. He endured the gradually increasing dizziness in his mind and ran all the way. The Tiger Knight followed closely behind, launching attacks from time to time, causing Qin Feng and the others to stagger and roll. He suppressed his power, not daring to make too much noise. Furthermore, in his view, there was no longer any need for him to make a move. After inhaling so much poison, without an antidote, the other party would surely die. In fact, this was indeed the case. Qin Feng's lips were now black and his eyes were red. Even the surface of his body was surrounded by black qi, which was the poisonous gas seeping out from his pores. His body was filled with poisonous gas, and it was continuously corroding his flesh. Qin Feng could feel that the power in his body was constantly fading away. Damn it! My power of purification cannot work on 3 people at the same time, Tan Xian cursed in a low voice. Don't care about him. It's better to be poisoned to death than to be captured by them, Jing Wui said. At this moment, his eyes were scarlet. He had been badly corroded by the poisonous gas. By the way, can the 100 tribulations heaven-devouring art devour poison gas? Qin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He quickly activated his devouring power and devoured all the poison in his body. In an instant, he felt refreshed, and the poisonous gas in his body was quickly reduced. It works! Qin Feng was overjoyed, and he sped up the devouring power. The devouring power could devour poison gas, extract a small amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy and inject it into the sea, while the other toxins would be directly expelled from the body. With the devouring power of heaven-devouring art, the poison in Qin Feng's body sea-devouring art. At the same time, the heaven-devouring power, the heaven-devouring art, and Jingwui, the poison's heaven-devouring art. Oh my God, you even dare to inhale poisonous gas! Jingwui looked at Qin Feng in astonishment. Tan Xian's face was also filled with astonishment. God, God, and God, God, world, God, God, world, God, heaven, 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 God, God, NN. Chi. Soon, the three of them regained their composure, and their speed increased explosively. When the Tiger Knight saw this scene, his face couldn't help but become gloomy. If this stalemate continues, I'm afraid that even if I have more tricks up my sleeve, I'll still be in danger. The Tiger Knight's gaze twinkled. In the next second, his eyes suddenly froze and his hands swiftly formed seals. The problem of the poisonous gas was solved. However, before Qin Feng and the other two could relax, their expressions suddenly changed. An indescribable sense of danger enveloped them. Golden beams of light shot down from above in an earth-shattering manner. At this moment, Qin Feng and the other two felt as if they were stuck in a swamp, unable to move. He raised his head slightly, and his pupils violently shrank. This is Emperor Pagoda. Above, golden light raged. Vaguely, a huge golden pagoda appeared, exuding boundless power. These fluctuations contained boundless power. As they descended, it was as if they were going to suppress all evil. The skin of Qin Feng and the other two tensed up as a faint stabbing pain continuously eroded their tensed nerve. At this moment, even with his tenacious nature, he couldn't help but feel a trace of despair. It wasn't that they weren't strong, but that the royal family's foundation was too terrifying. A Tiger Knight actually had a treasure that was regarded as the greatest treasure of a major force. How could they fight against him? The Emperor Pagoda was one of the royal family's 4 great treasures. Its power wasn't weaker than the Saint-Triuin's demon-subduing pestle, sky-swallowing gourd, and purple copper palace. If a spirit-detecting realm expert controlled it, it could even contend with a small heaven realm expert. Golden light raged as the Emperor Pagoda slowly suppressed them. Under the Emperor Pagoda, Qin Feng's eyes turned red. He desperately circulated the 100 calamity sky-swallowing art. His spiritual energy and physical strength continued to converge, but he still couldn't break through the Emperor Pagoda's shackles. This level of treasure was too terrifying. It wasn't something he could contend with his strength. This isn't the real Emperor Pagoda, but it's not much different. Damn it, their imitation ability is so strong? Jingwui gritted his teeth and said. It's said that the 4 great treasures were all copied. I heard that the old ancestor refined them personally. It's extremely terrifying. Tan Xian said. At this moment, even he was a little desperate. Even if they added up all the treasures they had, they still wouldn't be able to use it. The key was that almost all the treasures were controlled by a small heaven realm expert. Its power was even more terrifying. Even a small heaven realm expert would have to spend a lot of effort to copy it, let alone them. Damn it, isn't he just a Tiger Knight? How could he bring out a unique imitation? He appeared nearby. He should be with the 7th prince or one of the other princes. It should be given to him by one of the princes, Qin Feng said with difficulty. Damn it, we can't hold on much longer. Looking at Qin Feng and the other two who were still struggling, The Tiger Knight had a mocking smile on his face. The imitation Emperor Pagoda was not something that could be casually taken out by the royal family. If he wasn't working for the 7th prince to capture Qin Feng, he wouldn't have the right to use it. Did the 7th prince not notice these 3 slaves? Thinking of the Emperor Pagoda, he couldn't help but think of the 7th prince. Could it be that the remnant fluctuations from the royal family's expert? Impossible? He quickly dispelled this unrealistic thought. The 7th prince was already a spirit-detecting expert and had countless treasures on him. The strongest of the 3 was only half a step into the spirit-detecting realm, so they couldn't threaten the 7th prince. It should be one of the 7th prince's attendants. With his strength, not to mention the same level, even if it was a small heaven realm expert, he was confident that he could suppress them. He couldn't think of how Qin Feng and the other 2 could escape from his hands. And the truth was indeed so. No matter how Qin Feng and the other 2 resisted, they couldn't move and were constantly suppressed. However, just as the fake Emperor Pagoda was about to suppress them, the pagoda suddenly trembled violently. The strands of golden light that hung down also quietly began to break. What's going on? At this moment, the Tiger Knight's smile froze. Immediately after, his expression suddenly changed. He reflexively put away the fake Emperor Pagoda and looked around blankly. Qin Feng and the other 2 were also at a loss. They didn't understand what was going on. Heaven and earth were silent, and only the poisonous fog drifted slowly with the wind buzz. Suddenly, there seemed to be a slight sound. The 4 of them were like birds startled by the twang of a bough as they looked around. Qin Feng frowned. An indescribable feeling slowly settled in his heart. This feeling made him look even more confused. The 4 of them quickly looked around, and at a certain moment, their gazes all gathered in one direction. His. In the next moment, the pupils of the 4 of them shrank fiercely. In the place where their gazes gathered, an incomparably huge black shadow slowly appeared in the dense fog. Dark Evil Pagoda. Chapter 249. The whole country is shaken. An incomparably huge black tower appeared in the mist, quietly standing there with an ancient and desolate aura that caused one's mind to be suppressed. The giant pagoda's color was pitch black, but it was a bit dim. There were traces of time left behind, making it difficult to describe just how big it was. The giant pagoda was indescribably ancient. Its body was covered with mysterious runes, as if it had transcended time and space and existed eternally. Those lines were scarlet red in color. Upon closer inspection, one could actually feel that the lines were squirming, as if blood was slowly flowing. Qin Feng gazed at the incomparably ancient pagoda. The ancient pressure he felt from it was actually so dense. It was also at this moment that his eyes began to flicker. That strange feeling once again surfaced in his heart. He couldn't describe this feeling, but it didn't have the same piercing sense of danger. But it was also like a needle hidden in cotton, and blood could be seen when touched. Why is the Dark Tower giving me such a feeling? Qin Feng's heart stirred as he mumbled to himself. He looked at Tan Xian and Jingwei, and the latter 2 also looked over. Soon after, all 3 of their gazes focused slightly. The moment they looked at each other, they all understood. They all had the same feeling. He had heard some legends about the Dark Tower before. It was said that it would appear in the Heavenly Forest's dead swamp. No one knew its origin, and no one dared to pursue the matter because there had been extremely powerful people who had come into contact with it in the past. However, none of them came back alive. It symbolized darkness, evil, and death. There were even rumors in the outside world that the Dark Evil Tower was guarding the passage between the human world and the underworld. It was the Grim Reaper that harvested lives. Dark Evil Tower. The Tiger Knight's voice trembled, and his eyes were filled with fear. As a member of the imperial family, he had a better understanding of the Tower of Death. Not only did this thing symbolize death and bring about misfortune, it was also the natural enemy of the people in the imperial capital. A peerless expert in the city had once said that the people of the imperial capital were not allowed to go near the dark evil tower. Otherwise, their lives would be in danger. He decisively retreated far away from this place. Qin Feng and the other two ignored the Tiger Knight and stared blankly at the giant tower. Perhaps due to his instincts, Qin Feng took a step forward and walked towards the dark tower. As they got closer, the ancient aura became even more intense. A terrifying oppressive might slowly descended upon them. Qin Feng resisted the pressure, and his body was slightly deformed from the pressure. Blood seeped out of his pores. There were a few times when he wanted to retreat, but for some reason, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity with the Dark Tower. It was this sense of intimacy that allowed him to slowly walk forward without stopping even when he was facing death. Jing Wui and Tan Xian also followed. They shared the same sentiments as Qin Feng. The Tiger Knight's eyes flickered as he watched this scene. Idiots! He snorted coldly, thinking that these three people were courting death. Creak! At the bottom of the tower, a small door slowly opened. Behind the door, it was pitch black. It was like a passage to the underworld, making one's skin crawl. Qin Feng and the other two braced themselves and walked in. Bang! After they walked in, the door suddenly closed. The Tiger Knight was stunned at this scene. Then, his eyes flickered even more. As a Tiger Knight, he had experienced countless killings. He had truly been baptized by fire and iron. He was a bold but careful person. He also knew that the more dangerous a place was, the more opportunities there were. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chased Qin Feng and the other two to this place. Now that Qin Feng and the other two had successfully entered, his fear of the Dark Tower was lessened. He slowly approached the Dark Tower. Buzz! Suddenly, all the hair on his body stood on end. An indescribably terrifying aura spread out from the Dark Tower. Magic treasures flew out from his body and exploded in the air to slow down the spread of the aura. The Tiger Knight quickly retreated. This time, he flew more than 1,000 meters away. Why can they go in? It's King Evil. The Tiger Knight frowned as he looked at the Dark Tower with lingering fear. In the end, he still retreated. His intuition told him that even if he was 1,000 meters away, it was still extremely dangerous. I'll wait outside. It's fine if you die in there, but if you come out alive, humph. On this day, a purple-gold light streaked across the sky of the imperial capital, bringing with it a tragic aura. What's going on? What's that? In the city, countless people raised their heads in shock and looked at the purple-gold light streaking across the sky. There seems to be a person lying in the light, covered in blood. Is he dead? Some people who saw it said, "Why do I feel that person is a little familiar? Oh my God, that looks like the seventh prince." It was unknown who shouted. Immediately, the entire city fell silent. Countless people were shocked. The seventh prince was dead? Some important people were also shocked. They looked up at the purple-gold light that rushed into the palace and were speechless for a long time. The seventh prince has fallen. The world is about to change, a respected elder said in a heavy tone. Countless people were shocked. Their hearts trembled and they were speechless. A prince had died. This was a shocking matter. Who would have the guts to kill a prince? Such a terrifying thing had never happened in ancient times. Not long after the purple-gold light entered the palace, there was an earth-shaking roar from inside. Who killed my son? Find out for me. That kind of angry roar, along with a terrifying spiritual energy and extremely cold killing intent, spread to every corner of the imperial capital. Many people trembled, worried that they would be implicated. The entire imperial capital fell into an oppressive atmosphere. Dark clouds covered the sky, and thunder rumbled. It was so oppressive that it was difficult to breathe. That day, army after army rushed out of the city with murderous intent. The entire world was filled with the smell of blood. The sky seemed to be weeping blood, and it was scarlet red. Strong winds swept through the world, bringing with it a strong smell of blood that spread in all directions. On the same day, a piece of news spread out. The entire imperial capital fell into silence. Those armies followed the traces of the seventh prince with a secret method. Everywhere they passed, there was a massacre. In just half a day, at least 3 medium-sized slave residences were massacred. Hundreds of thousands of people were brutally slaughtered. Blood flowed everywhere, and the earth was dyed red. It was a tragedy. Compared to the silence in the city, the tens of millions of slaves outside the city fell into panic. Many places were massacred, and countless people fled in a frenzy, migrating to remote areas. This was a disaster. For the slaves, it was no less than a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. It was the end of the world. Qin Feng. In the sky above the imperial capital, the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber trembled, revealing an image. In the image, Qin Feng's figure appeared. He raised a stone axe and chopped down at the seventh prince. Everyone in the imperial capital recognized him. It was impossible for him not to be recognized when he suppressed 2 heavenly kings at the same time. Oh my God, don't tell me that the seventh prince was not killed by an elder, but by Qin Feng. Many people in the imperial capital found it hard to believe. How was this possible? How could Qin Feng kill the seventh prince? As things developed, they already knew some news. The seventh prince's body was brought back by the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber. That was a powerful weapon. If it were not for its special characteristics, it could be ranked as the 5th most powerful weapon. Many people felt that it was impossible. The seventh prince had a weapon like the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber. No matter how strong Qin Feng was, he could not be a match for him. Moreover, the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber specialized in countering his spiritual power. However, the imperial capital's next move convinced them. Chapter 250. A startling confrontation. Is that slave really capable of stopping the dragon-slaying god-killing saber and killing the seventh prince? Everyone was shocked. Even the people outside of the imperial capital found it unbelievable that a student from St. Ryuin could kill the seventh prince, who had the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber, which specialized in restraining spiritual energy. This was simply a fantasy. It's very likely that he colluded with other experts from St. Ryuin to do it, someone speculated. That was the only explanation. The powerful army, the Wolf Rider, and even more powerful Tiger Riders, moved out with great momentum towards the St. Ryuin. When the Son of Heaven is enraged, millions of corpses will fall. A bloody massacre will attract the wrath of the heavens. Some of the older elders sighed. Their voices were filled with worry. Thousands of miles away from the imperial capital, the army had stopped and was filled with killing intent. Opposite them, countless figures stood in the air, releasing terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations. The experts of the St. Ryuin and the top experts of the other forces had joined forces to fight against the imperial capital. An indescribable murderous aura filled the air. Imperial capital, are you really going to disregard the ancestral rules and commit a heinous crime of murder? A middle-aged man shouted. Terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations surged around him. The group of armored cavalry was silent and disciplined. They were all motionless like stone statues, but their gazes were somewhat frightening. Each of them revealed a faint cold light. These were the most elite warriors who had survived from the cruelest of bloody battlefields. At the very front, thousands of red, purple, and white wolf rider were sitting on the backs of giant wolves. Their eyes were filled with hesitation, and cold, sharp arrows were shot out from their eyes. In midair, over 100 black tigers roared as they flapped their wings. On the backs of the black tigers sat a person, and they were like stone statues. He was exuding a monstrous fighting spirit. It actually caused the sky to slightly distort. Below, there were also densely packed steel warriors. They were cold and murderous. None of these people made a sound. They had iron-blooded discipline. Creak. At this moment, a golden chariot slowly walked over in the air. The one pulling the carriage was a powerful flood dragon. Its spiritual power had reached the level of a fifth-order spirit beast, which was equivalent to a small heaven realm powerhouse. A spirit beast that was comparable to a human small heaven realm elite was just a cart puller. This caused the enslaved experts' hearts to sink. It seemed like the other party had sent a big shot this time. Sinful Qin Feng, you killed my brother's son. You should be punished for your crime. Saint Ruin is not a disciple of the sect. Hand over Qin Feng, the dean of Saint Ruin, and all the elders, and commit suicide. Then, this matter will be settled. A dignified and indifferent voice slowly came from the carriage. His tone was filled with an unquestionable authority. Qin Feng killed the seventh prince. Just look for him. You can search through the primeval lands, but the people of Saint Ruin have nothing to do with this matter. They shouldn't be implicated, said an elder. The imperial family has followed the system of punishment since ancient times. The indifferent voice sounded again, without any emotion. If we are talking about the ancestral system, you have violated it by massacring so wantonly. Aren't you worried that the incident from thousands of years ago will happen again? Said the elder. The heavenly rules are broken. The person on the chariot seemed to sigh. Then, a cold voice sounded. Today, if you don't hand over Qin Feng, we will massacre Saint Ruin and all the other forces. You don't have the consciousness of being a slave. You should be killed. Attack! Following that person's words, the spiritual energy in the area instantly became violent. In an instant, it was as if the whole world was stretched taut. Are you not afraid of the wrath of heaven? The people of Saint Ruin snorted. Kill. However, they were answered by countless powerful attacks. Since you have ignored the ancestral system, we will fight to the death. Kill. Suddenly, the two sides exploded with terrifying energy wave. Before they even exchanged blows, the battle intent was like tangible energy that collided. At the point of contact, the space quietly twisted. Haha! You really dare to slaughter Saint Ruin? However, just as the battle was about to break out, an old laughter came out of nowhere, causing both sides to pause. At the same time, a supreme power seeped out from all directions. The power was so strong that it caused the souls of all the experts here to palpitate. The prince has fallen. There must be an explanation. At this moment, a powerful aura faintly spread out from the imperial capital, protecting the people of the imperial capital. There were extremely powerful figures on both sides. This caused the battle to come to a standstill, and no one dared to attack. The imperial capital will not be threatened. Yes, we will not be threatened. Fight! 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 Tens of thousands of cavalrymen roared. Their high battle intent soared into the sky, causing the dark clouds to be diluted. Royal family, do you really want to start this battle? The ancient existence in Saint Ruin spoke, his tone serious. The dignity of the royal family cannot be offended. There must be an explanation for the death of the prince. The supreme existence in the imperial capital said indifferently, hand over Qin Feng, and the royal family will withdraw their troops. They will not make things difficult for you. Qin Feng has not returned. Whether he has returned or not, we will know once we enter the courtyard. You can investigate other places in the primeval land, but not in Saint Ruin. Then we can only start the battle. The Supreme Existence said, the royal family will not accept compromise, and will not compromise. There must be an explanation for the death of the prince. The Saint Ruin was silent for a long time, then a sigh was heard. If you only care about Qin Feng, there is no need to start this battle. If you use this as an excuse to cause trouble, the Saint Ruin can only fight. Everyone in Saint Ruin, listen up. Today we swear to protect the Saint Ruin to the death. Protect the Saint Ruin and fight to the death. Countless people in the Saint Ruin shouted loudly, and their battle intent soared to the highest heavens. The two sides confronted each other, and terrifying destructive energy surged. Before they came into contact, the sky was slightly distorted, and a bitter and bloody murderous aura slowly rippled. Ha ha! Royal family, do you really dare to start the battle? Be careful not to attract something that should not appear. No one can bear it. At this moment, a sinister wind suddenly lingered between heaven and earth. Black gas surged, and a monstrous roar was heard. It was as if there were ghosts screaming and wailing, and it made people feel a chill down their back. You haven't passed away yet? The supreme existence in the imperial capital said, his tone full of surprise. Then there was silence. The world quieted down for a moment, and neither side acted rashly. Retreat. After a long silence, the person in the carriage finally spat out a word. Whoosh, whoosh. The tens of thousands of troops retreated in unison, and there was no chaos at all. We've won. The Saint Ruin and the enslaved forces cheered loudly, and the gloominess in their hearts was swept away. Being able to make the imperial capital retreat was something that had never happened before. All forces move out. We must bring Qin Feng back before the heavenly road opens. He is the most likely person to succeed in ascending to the heavens in thousands of years, the old man said in a low voice, his eyes flickering. Chapter 251. Tragic past. Qin Feng's mind was in a daze for a while, and the light in front of him gradually brightened. This place looked like a huge palace, and the stone walls around him were engraved with all kinds of images of beasts. It looked extremely ancient. He cautiously scanned his surroundings and found that there was nothing here. It was like an empty hall. Where are they? Qin Feng was shocked. Where were Tan Xian and Jing Wei? They had entered the dark, evil tower together. How could they be gone? After testing, you are of the pure-blood lineage. You can accept the test and receive the inheritance. All of a sudden, a mechanical voice rang out. The voice was cold and indifferent. It sounded like a machine without any emotion. Qin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He quickly scanned his surroundings, but found nothing. Who are you? Who I am is not important. What is important is that you are of the pure-blood lineage. You can accept the test. The mechanical voice sounded again, cold and emotionless. What is the pure-blood lineage? Qin Feng frowned. Do you accept the test? If you pass, you can receive the inheritance. The mechanical voice sounded. Sorry, I don't accept. I just want to know where my friends are. Qin Feng shook his head. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. He felt that the owner of the voice was tricking him. He only cared about where Tan Xian and Jing Wei were. They are also of the pure-blood lineage. Naturally, they are where they should be. The mechanical voice sounded. Do you accept the test? I said I don't accept. If you want to kill me, then hurry up. If you don't, then let me and my friends go. We just came here by accident to take refuge. This time, there was a long silence before the mechanical voice sounded again. However, this time, Qin Feng was able to hear a trace of indescribable sadness and helplessness. The sea has turned into mulberry fields, and all living things have turned to dust. The pure-blood lineage has lost its sense of belonging. What a pity! Fine, I'll let you witness that sorrowful scene. As the voice fell, a fog suddenly rose around them. Buzz buzz. Reliefs rose from the fog. These reliefs were engraved with many patterns and some old stories. Qin Feng looked at them one by one. These reliefs seemed to be describing a period of time in the past. From the relief carvings in front, one could clearly see that it was a flourishing age where various races coexisted. Resplendent geniuses rose to prominence, towering above the clouds and overlooking the heavens. However, later on, a great battle erupted. There was a tribe that was extremely resplendent, producing several exceptional figures who could overlook the heavens. It was as if they had appeared out of nowhere, sweeping away all enemies and protecting this world. However, an unforeseen event occurred at that moment. After repelling the enemy and entering a peaceful era, many of the peerless figures of that tribe mysteriously disappeared during a certain period of this peaceful era. Then, the tribe was massacred. At this moment, Qin Feng's heart was moved, and he felt a lump in his throat. He saw that there was a great battle between different races. This tribe was ambushed while migrating. Blood dyed this region red, and many people died one after another. This tribe seemed to be extremely glorious back then, but they encountered a great battle and were slaughtered by other tribes. Then, they fell into eternal darkness. Was this something that happened during a certain period of time back then? Qin Feng was greatly moved. As he looked at those scenes, great waves rose and fell within his heart. He clenched his fists from time to time and roared from time to time. He actually couldn't control his emotions. It was because he saw 7 or 8-year-old children fighting bravely, crying blood as they fought. The result was extremely pitiful, being wiped out. The adult men, for the sake of protecting their clansmen's retreat, fell one after another. Blood dyed the skies, tragic and tragic. In the end, even the women, children, and the elderly were fighting. A tribe fought until the end. Even the elderly, women, and children entered the battlefield, yet they were all slaughtered. What kind of bloody and cruel past was this? They were a tribe that contributed greatly. Why were they slaughtered? Qin Feng clenched his fists, roaring with a hoarse voice. There was a wave of resentment within his heart. He really wanted to roar out angrily and rush into that era to participate in that battle. He didn't understand and was incomparably angry. Why would the tribe that contributed the most be slaughtered? They were heroes who contributed greatly, so they shouldn't have this type of ending. Even the elderly, women, and children were killed. Those executioners were too hateful. The final relief carving described the final battlefield. There were exceptional figures fighting a great battle. Someone roared angrily as he was smashed to pieces. Blood dyed the starry sky, and his body and soul were destroyed on the spot. That was a peerless figure of that tribe who looked down on the heavens. He had contributed greatly to this world, but he ended up in such a miserable state. There was more than one such sorrowful scene. Qin Feng's mind trembled, and his mind uncontrollably rushed into the final relief carving. He appeared in a resplendent starry sky, but it was dyed with blood. Everywhere was filled with sorrow and misery. He saw an expert who reached the heavens leading a group of generals into the depths of the starry sky, but they were still slaughtered. Qin Feng's pupils contracted. That was a spirit master who was unimaginably strong. With a raise of his hand, the starry sky exploded, destroying a group of people who were chasing after him. Boom! Suddenly, the spirit master raised his head and looked in a certain direction. His eyes were filled with deep sorrow. Lord Song has fallen and Lord Wuqiong has also passed away. They were still young, but they could already look down on the heavens. Unfortunately, they all died in battle. These damned executioners. We wanted to help, but we were powerless. How hateful! Many generals roared. Their eyes were red and tears flowed down. The great figures they revered fell one after another, passing away just like that. They would have stunned the entire era, but they had ended up in such a state. They had fought in the outer realm to protect this sky. Why were they slaughtered instead? Vast and terrifying ripples spread in other directions. If you want to fight, I'll accompany you in the final battle today. The high-level spirit master had a stooped figure and white hair, but his body was glowing as if he was transforming into a dragon. In the battle, his essence, energy, and spirit were rapidly rising. Endless troops charged out from all directions and surrounded this group of battle generals. The spirit master turned into a 25-year-old man in the blink of an eye. He had a handsome face, sharp eyebrows, and starry eyes. With a raise of his hand, the power of heaven and earth gathered. Damn it, how can someone of this level appear in this race? Everyone roared angrily, their hearts trembling. This race was too heaven-defying. Such figures appeared one after another. If they hadn't been forced into a desperate situation, they wouldn't have believed that this race was so powerful. Every movement of the psychic master exuded boundless power. Stars moved, heaven and earth moved, and all of the forces in several directions were wiped out. Boom! A figure who looked down on the heavens made a move. He reached out a large hand and slapped down. The spirit master raised his hand, and the trajectory of heaven and earth changed. The great Tao rumbled, and space-time fragments danced. What's the point of killing yourself like this? Your race will eventually perish. The general trend is unstoppable. The large hand was obliterated, and a cold voice sounded. Haha, even if my race is completely destroyed, you won't be able to walk that path. Your vision determines your achievements. How can you achieve supreme status if you don't have a tolerant heart? Ridiculous, ridiculous. 7 or 8 of his generals had died in battle, but the spirit master was laughing. However, his laughter was filled with sadness and desolation. What did you do when the outer realm invaded? What did you do when the world was destroyed? But after we succeeded, you attacked and massacred us wantonly. You were afraid and couldn't tolerate us. You didn't even spare the old, the young, the women, and the children. You wanted to exterminate our race. Such temperament and tolerance have already determined your future achievements. The spirit master laughed wildly. Tears glistened on his face. His entire body was burning. He wanted to destroy this part of the universe. In the end, nothing would be left. Only his voice, filled with monstrous hatred, echoed in this part of the universe. Don't go too far in everything. Otherwise, when we return in the future, the wrath of heaven will follow. In the end, the scene disappeared, and Qin Feng's mind returned. Tears slowly flowed down his face. Is this how my ancestors were slaughtered? Is this how we were enslaved? He laughed softly. His laughter was filled with indescribable madness and hatred. Chapter 252. Endless killing. Qin Feng clenched his fists tightly, his heart filled with hatred. How much he wanted to rush up and fight in that starry sky. However, that was something that happened during that period of time. He could only watch helplessly like a passerby. He had a belly full of anger, but he had nowhere to vent it. The bond of blood being thicker than water made him instantly understand that those were his ancestors. Yet they were all cruelly killed. Ha ha! Descendants of sinners, ha 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 ha, this is the biggest joke in the world. Qin Feng laughed loudly, tears rolling down his cheeks. They were sinners. The blood of sinners flowed in their veins since birth. Their ancestors had committed heinous crimes. Their sins were so great that thousands of generations of descendants were implicated. What the f*ck? Their ancestors were meritorious officials. In order to protect this world, they fought against foreign invaders. In the end, they were killed by those despicable people, and the family members of meritorious officials were kept in captivity like animals. In other words, they were sinners. Even their descendants were branded as the descendants of sinners. Even we ourselves thought that our ancestors had made a mistake and that we were born to be sinners. What a *king joke. Qin Feng laughed in a low voice. His eyes were filled with intense hatred and raging flames. We are the descendants of meritorious officials, not the descendants of sinners. The glory of our ancestors will be protected by us. The blood and tears of our ancestors will be wiped away by us. The truth will not be buried. One day it will be revealed to the world. The blood of the pure-blooded lineage has not dissipated. Are you willing to accept the test and receive the inheritance? The mechanical voice sounded again. Unfilial descendant, I am willing to accept. Qin Feng nodded heavily, his eyes red. Just as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly shattered. Dim light gathered, as if forming a small vortex that led to an unknown place. Looking at the dark vortex of light, Qin Feng did not hesitate in the slightest and entered the vortex of light. The darkness in front of him only lasted for an instant. However, in that instant, Qin Feng felt that space and time were distorted. It was as if he had traveled an indescribably great distance in that instant. The darkness quickly disappeared, and when Qin Feng opened his blurry eyes, he couldn't help but tremble violently. What appeared before him was an ancient place. The place was mottled, with an ancient aura surging toward him. What shocked him the most was that a cruel and bloody massacre was taking place at the center of the world. Kill everyone from the Sin bloodline. Leave no one alive. A knight in armor was sitting on top of a huge beast, waving his blade. Cold light flashed as he attacked the old, weak, women, and children who were fleeing for their lives. There will be retribution for killing like this. An elder roared angrily. He had lost an arm, but he was still fighting with all his might. He wanted to give his clansmen more time to escape. "Grandpa, don't. Come back." Behind him, a little girl about 3 or 4 years old shouted. There was a 12 or 13-year-old boy beside the little girl. He clenched his fists tightly and didn't say a word. "Ah San, take them and leave quickly." The old man turned his head and instructed. The resolute expression on his face made one's heart ache. Even an old man with half a foot in the coffin was fighting. This was a disaster for the entire clan. The old man wasn't weak. He killed 3 or 4 people in a row, but in the end, he was beheaded by a knight. His head rolled far away, but his eyes never closed. "Grandpa!" The little girl screamed at the top of her lungs. "Young master, young miss, leave quickly." Asan blocked in front. His chest was pierced by a spear, and he died on the spot. "Sister, let's go." The little boy finally couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up and pounced forward. "Poochie!" The little boy was extremely fast. His figure was like a ghost as he killed a careless executioner. There's actually a high-level innate bastard? Another executioner came. Even though the little boy was heaven-defying, he hadn't really matured yet. His chest was pierced by a spear, and he was lifted into the air. The spear shook, and the little boy exploded. A young life was harvested. He was at the prime of his life, but he was killed in the cradle. The little girl witnessed this scene. Her eyes widened, and her lively gaze became empty. When Qin Feng saw this scene, hatred surged in his heart. Killing intent was about to burst out of his chest. He wanted to kill. He wanted to kill all these executioners. "Ah!" he roared. His body shone, and a chaotic luster flickered crazily. He roared and charged over. On his fist, chaotic luster surged. He punched the executioner's head, directly blasting it apart, saving the little girl who was about to be killed. "Don't be afraid. Big Brother is here." Qin Feng could feel the little girl's fear. "Big Brother, my family is all dead." The little girl cried. There's also a high-level innate bastard." 2 executioners charged over. Qin Feng put down the little girl and charged over, blasting one of them with a punch. He could feel that the strength of these people was suppressed to the same level as him. Since this was a test, there was naturally a chance of survival. Without a doubt, these executioners were extremely powerful back then. He was no match for them. Hence, this was a test, a battle of the same level. It's not a high-level innate bastard, but a heaven-defying one. Everyone, kill this bastard for me. Immediately, all the executioners charged towards Qin Feng. All right, I'll kill all of you today. Qin Feng laughed. He knew that all of this was fake. No matter how many people he killed, nothing would change. However, he needed to vent his anger. Even if it was fake, he had to use the cruelest killing to vent the anger in his heart. Hundreds of people of the same level joined forces to attack. Without a doubt, Qin Feng suffered unimaginable injuries. When he killed the 100th person, his left arm was chopped off. There was a hideous wound on his back, and a broken spear was stabbed into his shoulder. He was seriously injured. This is a test. If you live, you will obtain a portion of the inheritance. If you die, you die. At this moment, the mechanical voice suddenly sounded in Qin Feng's heart. Qin Feng's heart trembled. He quickly calmed down and did not let his rationality be controlled by killing. As he fought, he quickly circulated the 100 calamity heaven-devouring art to devour the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. For some reason, the circulation of the 100 calamity heaven-devouring art was extremely smooth at this moment. When the 200th person's head was blown off, Qin Feng was also at the end of his rope. His calves were broken, and there were 2 bloody holes in his chest. I'm immortal. Qin Feng dragged his broken body and continued his slaughter. And at this moment, his speed had slowed down. His movements were sluggish, but the experience he gained increased. Every time he attacked, it seemed slow, but it was ingenious and focused on light. He did not attack many times, but every time he attacked, he would reap the life of an executioner. After the 300th person died in his hands, Qin Feng was almost at the end of his rope. His body was covered in blood, and his eyes were blood-red. He was too tired. He fell to the ground and could not even circulate the 100 calamity heaven-devouring art. Every part of his body was losing vitality. This was a sign that his vital signs were weakening. Qin Feng's eyes gradually dimmed. He knew that his lifespan was coming to an end. He had lost a lot of his life essence. He was unwilling. How could he leave like this? He still had a lot of things to do. I can't die yet. Qin Feng roared in his heart. Bits of chaotic light emitted from his body and wrapped him up. Great desolate battle body. His furious roar had an ancient tone to it. Qin Feng stood up with a whoosh. His eyes were like lightning. The chaotic light on his body flickered crazily. His body turned chaotic, and he became invulnerable. Supreme evolution. This child is too heaven-defying. He must not be allowed to live. A group of people attacked Qin Feng. Knives, spears, and spears attacked Qin Feng's body. Clang! The sound of metal rang out. These sharp weapons could not hurt Qin Feng's body at all. They did not even leave a mark. His wounds were healing, and his severed arms were regenerating. Qin Feng's aura was rising at an extremely fast speed. My lineage can't be exterminated. Chapter 253. Spiritual inheritance. Qin Feng's body seemed to have turned into a chaotic color. It was extremely sturdy and invulnerable. His combat strength soared, and he slaughtered the last 100 people. After killing all of them, Qin Feng fell heavily on the ground and laughed loudly. There was venting, unwillingness, and desolation. All kinds of emotions shrouded his heart. The corpses on the ground and the people running away all turned into light spots and disappeared. In this vast ancient world, only Qin Feng was lying there alone. His eyes were closed as if he was in a deep sleep, but also as if he was meditating. At a certain moment, he suddenly opened his eyes. In his deep eyes, a chaotic color flashed. The inheritance of the supreme great desolate battle body? Qin Feng sat up and looked at his hands. With a thought, the chaotic light flickered. Wherever the chaotic light spread, it would solidify and become incomparably hard. Is this the inheritance? Qin Feng whispered. He had never had this kind of power before. But when he entered this battlefield, his emotions surged and his killing intent grew. This kind of power naturally manifested itself. You have passed the test. When the mechanical voice sounded, Qin Feng's vision blurred. Then, he returned to the first floor of the dark evil tower. Is this the inheritance I have received? Qin Feng asked. Not bad. You walked on the most brilliant path of the past, the path that illuminated an entire era. That was the path of the ancestors. The mechanical voice sounded, but now there was a hint of gentleness, no longer cold. Do you want to continue the next test? Usually, after passing the first round, you can choose to withdraw. A small gray pagoda appeared in front of Qin Feng. That mechanical voice was emitted from it. Who are you? Qin Feng stared at the gray tower in front of him and asked. Detector, waiter, guardian. The gray tower shook and said, Is it to test the pure blood lineage, wait for the pure blood lineage, and protect the pure blood lineage? Qin Feng sighed softly. His heart ached. This was a method left behind by his ancestors. Generation after generation, they were waiting for their descendants to uncover the tragic past that had been covered in dust for so many years. Before you have enough strength to protect yourself, don't call yourself a pureblood. Otherwise, even now, you will be hunted down endlessly. The gray tower warned. Hearing this, Qin Feng nodded slightly. After a moment of silence, he suddenly asked, Why were the pure-blooded lineages massacred? What exactly happened back then that caused us to still be enslaved after so many years? What happened back then was far more complicated than what was recorded. If you don't have enough strength, don't uncover that period. Otherwise, a disaster will happen. Now, will you accept the second trial? I'll tell you in advance that this trial is very difficult. If you fail, you'll be lost forever. I accept. Qin Feng's eyes were firm. All right, let's go to the second floor. Hearing this, Qin Feng walked up the stairs and arrived at the second floor. The environment here was almost the same as the first floor. However, in the center, there was a 1-meter square stone platform. On the stone platform, there was a wooden box. The wooden box was simple and mottled. The corners were worn and had traces of time. Open the wooden box and accept your test. A mechanical voice rang out once again. There was no emotion in it. Qin Feng could tell that this should be another detector. He nodded slightly, walked onto the stone platform, and opened the wooden box. In an instant, it was as if time had turned back. Qin Feng only felt a force in his mind being forcefully pulled into the wooden box. This situation only lasted for half a breath. When he woke up, he appeared in a white world. This was a deathly silent world. There was no sound. Nothing could be seen. There was no sound. What test is this? Qin Feng looked around cautiously. Suddenly, his expression changed. He felt a powerful and inexplicable force fill the air. Boom! His body directly exploded. This situation caused Qin Feng to be incomparably dumbstruck. He actually exploded without any warning. Am I going to die just like that? When he finished speaking, he strangely found that his consciousness was still there. Under his will, his body actually reassembled. So this is my spiritual body. Qin Feng understood. This situation was similar to the divine power disc. To obtain the spirit path, you need to refine your spiritual body. A faint voice suddenly rang out in this vast white world. Qin Feng did not have time to think about the meaning of these words. His spiritual body exploded again. Refine your spiritual body, spirit path, spirit master. His body reassembled again. Qin Feng immediately understood. This was a spiritual inheritance. In the following time, Qin Feng's body exploded again and reassembled again and again. The cycle went on without stopping. The reason why spirit masters were born was mainly because of their spiritual power. Everyone had spiritual power. However, only those who were born with strong spiritual power had a special understanding of heaven and earth, and could naturally condense a spiritual body and defeat the guardian of the spirit gate could become a spirit master. It could be said that spiritual power was the key to whether or not one could become a spirit master. However, spiritual power was not completely determined by nature. It could also be trained, such as him. The process Qin Feng was going through now was the best training. Qin Feng was also aware of this. Therefore, no matter how difficult it was, he had to persevere. However, he was a little curious. If the examiner could detect his bloodline, why couldn't they detect that he was a spirit master? He did not understand why this test was made. His spiritual body was forcibly exploded by an external force. This was no less painful than his body being exploded. Only those who had experienced it personally could understand the pain and suffering. Every time he exploded, Qin Feng would do his best to reassemble. However, as the number of explosions increased, he gradually felt weak. The speed of his reassembly also gradually slowed down. However, every time he reassembled, the color and energy of his spiritual body became more solid. In this place, the concept of time was very vague. Qin Feng did not know how many times he exploded. His consciousness was already blurred. Only a trace of clarity was being protected, not allowing it to be destroyed. Qin Feng knew that once this last trace of clarity was destroyed, he would completely fall into darkness. At this time, he finally understood the warning of the Dark Tower. If he did not succeed in this test, he would be lost forever. This test was even more terrifying than the God Power Disc. At least in the God Power Disc, he could freely choose an area and retreat if he encountered a threat. However, there was no such thing here. There was only one path to take, and that was to persevere until he succeeded. Time passed by in a hurry. The trace of clarity in Qin Feng's heart gradually expanded. In the end, he completely woke up. Form. With a light shout in his heart, his body reassembled. This time, it did not explode. This was because his spiritual body was almost solid. It was almost like a real person. This is... Qin Feng stared at his hands as he sank into shock. The current him felt that he was completely real, just like a real person with flesh and blood. This feeling was not something the God Power Disc could provide. Moreover, he could feel that every inch of his body, or more accurately, his spiritual body, was surrounded by chaotic light spots. With a slight movement, the chaotic light spots disappeared, and he also disappeared. Chapter 254. The Spiritual Path. Qin Feng was shocked that the spiritual path could hide its owner. He only knew that the spiritual path could cover his entire body and prevent others from probing, but his body was still exposed to the air. But now, the spiritual path covered his entire body and completely concealed his body. Wasn't this invisibility? The spiritual inheritance is complete. When the voice sounded, Qin Feng's eyes suddenly opened in the center of the second floor. After a moment of confusion, he immediately sat down cross-legged. After leaving the white world, a huge amount of information was transmitted to his mind. This was a high-level spiritual master's understanding of the spiritual path, most likely reaching the level of a grandmaster or even a great grandmaster. To him, this was undoubtedly a huge treasure that needed to be digested slowly. After a long time, Qin Feng opened his eyes. Spiritual masters are really a complicated and powerful existence. He let out a soft sigh. He now had a deeper understanding of the spirit master profession. He also deeply understood why there were so few spiritual masters. This kind of person was simply born from the will of heaven and earth, and was favored by heaven and earth. There were very few spiritual masters in the St. Ryuan, and there were not many spiritual masters in the imperial capital. This showed how rare this profession was. After a sigh, he quickly used his spiritual path and slowly covered his entire body. He wanted to see if it could work in the spiritual sea and in the outside world. He watched as his neck slowly disappeared, then his chest, then his calves, feet, and finally his entire body completely disappeared. I can really become invisible. Qin Feng was delighted. This would be his trump card in the future. As long as it was not a spiritual master, He could directly use his spiritual path to cover his entire body and become invisible. Who would be able to discover him? Slightly calming his excitement, he calmed down and began to try to condense a spirit-gathering array. He knew that the origin of the spiritual sigil was a spirit-gathering array. Once the array was engraved into an object, once activated, the spirit-gathering array could mobilize the power of heaven and earth to launch a huge attack. But he also knew that there was no real way to condense a spirit-gathering array, nor was it fixed. This kind of array was very strange. Everyone's understanding was different, and the spirit-gathering array they condensed was different. Of course, most spirit masters couldn't form a spirit-gathering array, just like the Saint Ryuin. Inyuan wasn't the only heaven-grade spirit master, but he was the only one who could form a spirit-gathering array and carve a spirit rune. It could be seen that not every spirit master could refine a spirit sigil. He couldn't do it in the past, but things were different now. From that experience, Qin Feng also comprehended his own understanding of the spirit-gathering array. The so-called spirit-gathering array was a special spirit whirlpool that was condensed using spirit force. Then, through a strange arrangement, they were connected to each other, thus drawing in the power of heaven and earth to form a powerful force. According to the method, Qin Feng tried to condense a spiritual vortex. 1. Not long after, he condensed a spiritual vortex. It spun in the air, absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. So fast. Qin Feng was shocked. He naturally knew that he had only gained a deeper understanding of this industry through his experiences and insight. It was impossible for him to succeed. He was just giving it a try, but he didn't expect it to succeed. It was as if his mental power was instinctively condensed. In the test, the various aspects of the spirit path have been completely imprinted in your spirit body as you continue to forge it. Some spirit arrays, powerful spirit incantations, all these will be unlocked as your understanding deepens. You are of the pure blood lineage. This is also the recognition and approval of your lineage's spiritual masters. They open the door to the spirit Tao for you. Remember, don't let down the blood, sweat, and tears of your ancestors. A small white tower appeared and spoke. Qin Feng understood and nodded deeply. He took out a spirit stone from his Qiankuan bag. His forehead glowed and his mental power wrapped around it, suspending it in front of him. One after another, spirit whirlpools were engraved into the spirit stone. This was how the so-called spirit sigil came about. Of course, for a beginner like him, the quality of the engraved object had to be strong. Spirit masters engraved spirit whirlpools on objects through special positions. When used, they could directly detonate and erupt with a huge force. Of course, the power also depended on the number of spirit whirlpools. The more spirit whirlpools there were, the greater the power. Usually, to create a spirit sigil, one only needed to engrave 10 spirit whirlpools to succeed. Even if it was an ordinary object, once more than 10 spirit whirlpools were engraved to form a spirit-gathering formation, it would become extraordinary. Qin Feng engraved spirit whirlpools on the spirit stone. This was a complicated process. Even though he had such an imprint in his mind, he still had experience and comprehension. But in the end, this did not belong to him. To truly create a spirit sigil, the key was still his own comprehension and continuous experimentation. Moreover, engraving spirit whirlpools on objects was not that easy. It required precise control and a degree of control over the spirit whirlpools. Secondly, it was engraving in precise positions. The slightest mistake would result in failure. Qin Feng failed several times in a row before he finally understood the main point. Bang! However, just as he was about to engrave the 10th spirit whirlpool, the spirit stone suddenly exploded. Not bad, although the control of the spirit whirlpool's power is not precise, causing the power to leak and explode the spirit stone. However, to be able to do this after just touching it, it's rare since ancient times. The White Tower gave a very high evaluation. The White Tower shook, and pieces of black iron fell out of the void. "Try it with iron essence," it said. Looking at the black iron the size of a pebble, Qin Feng was speechless. These were all iron essence. Even 1,000 kilograms of iron might not be enough to form a thumb-sized iron essence. And the iron essence here probably weighed half a kilogram each. And there were hundreds of them. Even if he sold them, it would be a huge profit. Qin Feng did not hesitate and put them all into his Qiankuan bag. He left a piece of iron essence and enveloped it with his spirit power. His spirit power spread out, and after a while, an obscure power spread out from the black iron. However, this fluctuation only lasted for a breath before it disappeared. Success. Qin Feng smiled. He could feel the energy fluctuation contained in the black iron. Once it exploded, even a spirit-detecting expert would be in a difficult situation if they were careless. Moreover, this was under the premise that he did not have precise control over his spirit power. Otherwise, the power would be even greater. It's a pity that I can only set up 15. This was Qin Feng's only regret. With his current level of condensing mental whirlpools, he could only barely set up 15 of them. He couldn't set up more. Moreover, the spirit whirlpools were not solid, so they would not be effective for long. Qin Feng estimated that the spirit whirlpools would dissipate in less than half a day. This was because he was limited by his strength. After all, he had not reached the heaven grade yet. He needed at least a heaven grade spirit master to create a spirit rune to last for a long time. However, his regret did not last long. He could create a spirit rune at the elementary grade. This was enough to shock the world. "Excellent talent," the White Tower said. "I advise you not to continue with the third test. Otherwise, your life will be in danger," it said. "I want to try. If I can't do it, I'll quit," Qin Feng said. In the first test, he received the inheritance of the primeval battle body. In the second test, he received the path of spirit. The inheritances behind every test allowed him to benefit immensely. Qin Feng was very unwilling to give up just like that. "Go to the third level," the White Tower said. Chapter 255. Fight. This level was different from the previous two levels. There was an indescribable pressure that suppressed everything. "I'll take the third trial," Qin Feng said. He already knew that every level had a protector, a test, and an inheritance. "Are you sure?" A cold voice rang out. "Yes." Qin Feng nodded. Being able to pass 2 stages in a row means that your talent is extremely good. However, this stage has nothing to do with talent. It will be exceptionally dangerous. The guardian of this level warned. "I know, but I still want to try." Failure means death. "Are you sure you still want to try?" Qin Feng was stunned. After a moment of silence, he finally gritted his teeth and nodded. "I'll go." Throughout history, there have been many outstanding purebloods. However, those who can successfully pass this trial are as rare as phoenix feathers and water chestnut. The small crimson pagoda appeared and sighed. Qin Feng's pupils contracted. "More than one person has been here? After being enslaved here for tens of thousands of years, you are not the only pure-blooded descendant." Hong Ta paused for a moment before continuing. "In this trial, 99% of the people fail. Even if they were a prodigy or a peerless talent, in the end, all that is left behind is a pile of dried bones and endless sorrow and loneliness." Qin Feng fell silent. So it turned out that someone from his lineage had also made it here before. They were just like him, filled with anger and hatred. They wanted to rise up from here and seek justice for their ancestors from this world. Since they were willing to step forward wave after wave and disregard life and death, what reason did he have to retreat? "I will challenge this stage. Since someone has succeeded, I will be the next." All right. The red tower no longer obstructed him. Space wriggled, and a stone door slowly appeared. Enter the stone door and accept the third trial. Qin Feng nodded. He pushed open the stone door, turned into a beam of light, and was sucked in. When he opened his eyes, he was already in an ancient starry space. Stars dotted the surroundings, beautiful and brilliant. Qin Feng stared at the ancient galaxy in a daze. Suddenly, his eyes focused. In the distance, he saw some shattered bones mixed with blood, traveling through the desolate cosmos. Is this a former challenger? Staring at the shattered bones and fresh blood, Qin Feng felt his heart turning sour. He had a feeling that blood was thicker than water. That was a person who had the same blood as him, but had failed in this trial and was buried here. Suddenly, he sensed something in his heart and swiftly raised his head. After that, his pupils constricted fiercely. Deep within the starry sky, a chaotic glow was emitted as a figure slowly approached with an overwhelming pressure. That kind of aura seemed to be able to crush the universe. He only took slow steps, but the starry sky retreated under his feet. With each step, there was a galaxy. In a few breaths, he walked into this starry sky. This is a peerless character from your bloodline. Defeat him and you'll be able to pass the test and obtain the inheritance. Hong Ta's voice traveled into Qin Feng's ears, causing his heart to tremble. How could he possibly defeat a peerless figure who looked down on the heavens? Just a single glance from the other party was enough to destroy his body and soul. Don't worry, this is the young form of a peerless character who looks down on the heavens. He's at the same level as you, Hong Ta explained. Hearing this, Qin Feng breathed a sigh of relief. So it was a battle of the same level. To be able to become a peerless character who looks down on the heavens, he must have been a peerless genius when he was young, a character who stunned an era. Which one of these characters doesn't have an invincible aura? They can sweep through all opponents, and it's difficult for them to be defeated in the same level. Hong Ta warned. Qin Feng nodded. He knew this very well. The top character of an era who looked down on the heavens must have gone through a baptism of blood and fire, stepping on thousands of corpses to reach the peak. Every one of them was invincible in the same level. The test begins now. The demon-like figure was emitting a sacred chaotic glow as he slowly walked over. Feeling the endless battle intent erupting from the chaotic figure, Qin Feng's expression became slightly solemn. The young form of a peerless character who looks down on the heavens would be the most difficult hurdle he had ever encountered in the same level. Phew! He took a deep breath, and his expression became solemn. This battle would determine whether he could succeed or not. If he failed, he would die trying. Therefore, this battle was bound to be extremely tragic. Boom! The figure moved and appeared in front of Qin Feng in an instant, throwing a punch. The chaotic light flickered, releasing a terrifying power and an invincible aura. This was a true peerless genius. Qin Feng did not dare to be careless. He gathered all his strength on his fist, and the chaotic light spread. He gathered all the strength in his body and threw a punch. Boom! The two fists collided in the air, and visible energy ripples spread out crazily. Dong dong dong! Qin Feng took 3 steps back and barely managed to disperse the terrifying force. At this moment, his expression was extremely solemn. In a battle of the same level, he had never been defeated, and he could even challenge those of a higher level. However, facing this figure of the same level, he was actually at a disadvantage. This was not a battle of strength, but a battle of true strength. Boom! Qin Feng did not hold back. He circulated the spiritual power in his body to the extreme, and his mind power surged out, forming the ferocious tiger array. The two figures engaged in a frenzied battle in this lonely universe. Every punch landed on the flesh, and there were no fancy moves. It was purely a head-on collision. Every time they collided, there would be a dull sound. Boom! After another round of collision, Qin Feng was forced back, and the figure trembled. A tough fleshly body and perfectly condensed spiritual energy. Qin Feng sighed. From the battle, he could feel the strength of his opponent's physical body, and it was not weaker than his. In fact, it was slightly stronger. Moreover, he had the help of his mind power, but he was still at a disadvantage in the battle. Dragon Tiger Strangle. Qin Feng charged forward, using the Divine Dragon technique and the 10,000 Beasts summoning technique at the same time. The dragon and tiger roared and charged forward. However, what shocked him was that his opponent also used the Dragon Tiger Strangle, and the dragon and tiger shadows were more solid and powerful than his. Moreover, he could feel that his opponent also used the Divine Dragon technique and the 10,000 Beasts summoning technique. What was going on? Could it be that these two techniques were passed down by his ancestors from back then? Boom! The dragon and tiger roared, and the two dragons and tigers confronted each other in midair, devouring each other. Qin Feng was forced back by the aftershock, and his expression was slightly ugly. A pair of light wings spread out from his back, and Qin Feng's speed increased dramatically as he charged forward. Screech! At the same time, a pair of light wings appeared on his opponent's back, and their color was darker. The two of them fought again, and all kinds of beast shadows roared and collided heavily, shaking the void. Tyrant Dragon Claw. Qin Feng stretched out his hand, and a huge dragon claw stretched out, grabbing at his opponent with a ferocious force. Buzz! The figure formed a seal with both hands, and the black tortoise appeared above his head. Boom! The dragon claw grabbed the black tortoise's shell, but it did not break through. Chi! His opponent stretched out his hand, and an even bigger dragon claw came at him. Boom! When the dragon claw dissipated, the black tortoise's defense that Qin Feng summoned was also shattered. He was sent flying by the shockwave. Moo! With a swoosh, that figure appeared above Qin Feng. A gigantic beast leg stomped through the air, wanting to envelop Qin Feng. Chapter 256. Regain one's faith. Qin Feng didn't dare to be careless when he felt the beast's foot, which was as heavy as a mountain. He immediately activated his primitive war body. The light of chaos spread all over his body. He punched out and shattered the beast's foot. Whoosh! After activating the great desolate battle body, Qin Feng was immune to any attacks below the spirit-detecting realm. He charged towards that figure. The light of primal chaos flickered continuously, releasing its might. However, at this moment, his opponent was also using the primitive battle body to fight Qin Feng head-on. Two streaks of chaotic light constantly collided in the cold and desolate universe. They were like meteors colliding, erupting with terrifying ripples of energy. In just a short minute, the two of them had exchanged dozens of blows and were evenly matched. A minute later, the light of chaos on their bodies faded at the same time. Although the primitive battle body was powerful, there was a time limit for them to activate it. It was only 1 minute. In this regard, Qin Feng was not inferior to his opponent. However, they were only equal in this aspect. In other aspects, Qin Feng was weaker than his opponent. The other party's mastery of the divine dragon art and myriad beast summoning art was far deeper than his. Qin Feng's eyes flickered. Next, boundless water and fire energy gushed over. Flames towered up into the sky, exuding an unstoppable might. On the other side, waves rolled like a vast ocean, surging violently. Qin Feng used the water god technique and the fire god technique, but what shocked him was that his opponent also used the 5 elements technique. Earthen yellow energy surged like an earthen mountain pressing down. On the other side, golden light surged and the power of metal vibrated. Earth divine art, metal divine art? Qin Feng's heart trembled. He never would have thought that the other party had also cultivated the 5 elements arts, and 2 of them at that. That's not right. Suddenly, his expression froze. Behind the figure, light green energy flowed. As it surged, there seemed to be the sound of branches rustling. An endless aura spread out. Divine wood formula. Qin Feng was shaken. His opponent had actually mastered 3 types of 5 elements divine art. How was he supposed to fight him? His 5 elements art couldn't gain any advantage either. However, he had no way out. He could only bite the bullet and fight on. Whoosh, whoosh. Under his control, the power of fire and the power of water whizzed toward the figure. The other party controlled the power of metal, earth, and wood to charge over. The water that filled the sky was agitated as it rushed towards that figure. Rustle. The other party used the power of wood to meet the attack head-on. In the water flow, the trees grew madly, giving birth to even more power of wood. On the other side, a layer of earth covered the sky and blended with the flames. The layer of earth grew larger and larger. What happened? Qin Feng was shocked. His opponent's power of wood and earth seemed to have grown stronger after encountering his power of water and fire. What was going on? Qin Feng stared intently, and at a certain moment, his eyes narrowed. The increase in the power of wood seemed to have occurred after the absorption of his power of water. Similarly, the increase in the power of earth was due to the absorption of his power of fire. 5 elements engender one another. Water engenders wood, fire engenders earth. I understand now. What a profound battle. Qin Feng secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. The 5 elements engendering and restraining each other could actually be used in this aspect. Since you're using engendering to increase your power, I'll use restraining to weaken you. Rumble. He manipulated the power of fire, drawing it out from the layer of earth and wrapping it around the other party's power of metal, burning it with fire. The nature of heaven and earth. Essence triumphed over firmness, thus fire triumphed over metal. Soon, the power of metal weakened rapidly. Of course, this was because both sides' usage of the 5 elements art was similar. Otherwise, Qin Feng's fire wouldn't have been able to defeat his opponent's metal. When he manipulated the power of water, the other party also noticed it. The layer of earth pressed down, falling into the power of water. In an instant, the earth and water mixed, increasing the gravity. Qin Feng found it hard to control. Reality triumphs over illusion. Earth triumphs over water, damn it. Qin Feng cursed inwardly. The other party's power of earth just happened to restrain his power of water. I'll fight it out with you. Qin Feng's power of fire wrapped around the other party's power of metal and rushed into the power of wood. In an instant, the rows of towering trees were set ablaze. The power of fire grew rapidly, further increasing the suppression of the power of metal. Wood engendered fire. When encountering the power of wood, the power of fire would be able to maximize its power. However, the other party was obviously a battle veteran. Almost instantly, he manipulated the cement into the raging fire. At this moment, the power of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and the 5 elemental forces were fully unleashed. The 5 elements both engendered and restrained each other. They coexisted and merged with each other, yet they also devoured and repelled each other. In the lonely starry sky, the 5 elements of gold, green, blue, red, and yellow with different attributes devoured and resisted each other. It was bright and colorful, like a world of flowers, but only those who had experienced it could deeply understand the dangers within. Rumble. A huge explosion resounded. It was as if the thunder god had descended. The rumbling sound was extremely muffled and resounding. Pu ci. Qin Feng was blasted out as blood spurted from his mouth. He had suffered heavy injuries. Although the 5 elements mutually reinforced and countered each other, he only had the power of water and fire. His opponent had the power of 3 elements, so he was still at a disadvantage. He had the divine dragon art, the 10,000 beast summoning art, and even the five elements art had one more element than him. His opponent had all of his strongest trump cards. This was a terrifying opponent. He could be called a strong opponent, and there was no way to deal with him. He knows all the moves that I know. Furthermore, he is stronger than me. Qin Feng's eyes flickered, and a sense of helplessness rose in his heart. There was simply no way to deal with such a strong opponent. Whoosh! Mental energy spread out, and Xiao Chen's figure disappeared bit by bit. All his methods were ineffective. This was the only move he had left. Furthermore, he was sure that his opponent did not know how to use it, because his opponent was not a mental energy master. Qin Feng hid himself and secretly circulated the 100 calamity heaven-devouring art, quickly recovering his exhausted energy. He wanted to prepare a big move to determine the outcome of the battle in one move. Although a sneak attack was a little unfair, he had no choice but to do so. He was no match for his opponent in a head-on battle. He secretly moved his body and slowly approached the figure. However, just as he was about to make a move, the person suddenly turned around and punched at him with a fist that was suffused with chaotic light. How did he know where he was? Qin Feng's expression changed, but he did not have time to think so much. The heaven-devouring finger shot out and bombarded the opponent's fist. He quickly retreated, but the figure directly locked onto his position and rushed over. What kind of eye is that? Qin Feng was shocked. He saw a half-opened vertical eye between his opponent's eyebrows, with traces of bloody light seeping out. This is the Heaven's Eye. He can lock onto my position? Qin Feng changed his position several times, but he was immediately locked onto by his opponent. His mental concealment had no effect on him. He stopped, took a deep breath, and slowly withdrew his mental energy. This was a battle of inheritance. Any tricks would be useless. It seems that I was wrong. If I want to pass this stage, I can only rely on my true strength. The fear on his face slowly disappeared, and it was replaced by a fierce fighting spirit. As expected of a peerless figure who will overlook the sky in the future. Qin Feng chuckled, and his eyes gradually became firm. However, there will be a day when I will not be weaker than you. You have the belief of being invincible. I, Qin Feng, also have it. At this moment, Qin Feng's belief of being invincible, which had gradually faded after encountering this figure, burst forth in his heart again. Chapter 257. Battle of the Pinnacle Boom. The two of them charged at each other again. They fought until the sky darkened and blood gushed out. Being completely suppressed, Qin Feng had no other choice. If he wanted to live, he could only give it his all. Qin Feng fought like a madman. He used everything he had learned. The roars of beasts shook the sky, and his spiritual energy and mental energy roared. He fought fiercely with the chaotic figure. Boom! He was blasted away, suffering heavy injuries. Similarly, as he was sent flying, he pointed out with his finger. A beam of light shot out and pierced through his opponent's shoulder. Although Qin Feng was being suppressed, the gap was not large. Moreover, as the battle became more intense, Qin Feng's understanding of the Divine Dragon technique and the 10,000 Beasts summoning technique was slowly increasing. It was easier for him to comprehend things when he fought with his opponent, especially when he had the same level of power. As his comprehension deepened, his battle prowess increased as well. In the end, the two of them were almost on par. The two of them fought a crazy battle from one region to another. Everywhere they passed, it was a mess. Awesome! Qin Feng roared, his heart filled with pride. Although he was caught in a bitter battle, he had never felt this excited before. He was even moved. Fighting against a former peerless genius, he had benefited greatly. His battle prowess soared in the battle, and his various moves became more and more skillful. The battle became even more intense and cruel. Their fighting spirit had risen to the peak. They were familiar with each of their opponent's moves and knew their weaknesses. And in this kind of fight, the weak points were gradually perfected. Every move, attack and defense were orderly, and could be said to be perfect. Boom! All of a sudden, the chaotic light around the figure shone brightly. The light swirled and turned into a long chaotic halberd in front of him. An unconcealable sharpness emanated from the chaotic halberd. Qin Feng's pupils contracted. He could sense the smell of death. That primal chaos war spear had drunk countless amounts of blood. After experiencing many great battles, it was even dyed in the blood of exceptional heavenly talents of its generation. It was extremely unordinary. The primal chaos halberd gave Qin Feng a lot of pressure and made him uneasy. Whoosh! The figure of primal chaos rushed over. The spear pierced over, as if it had pierced through the void. In an instant, he appeared in front of Qin Feng. Qin Feng's hair stood on end as he quickly retreated. Bang! The battle spear vibrated and a beam of chaotic light shot out, directly hitting Qin Feng in the chest. Poochie! Qin Feng immediately coughed up blood, as if he had suffered a heavy blow. His body was sent flying hundreds of meters away. That figure stepped on the void and chased after him. Qin Feng raised his hand, and a black light burst out and appeared beside the figure. Explode! With a soft shout, the black metal directly exploded. Energy intertwined and a terrifying power wreaked havoc. This was the mental seal he had created before. It contained 15 mental energy vortexes and was extremely powerful. It could even injure experts under the spirit-detecting realm. Even a normal spirit-detecting realm expert would have the risk of dying if they were caught off guard. Qin Feng stared fixedly at the place where the violent energy interweaved. He didn't know how much damage this spiritual sigil could cause to the other party. All of a sudden, his eyes shrank. A figure walked out of the place where the energy weaved. Blood splattered from his body, but he didn't move at all. Obviously, this kind of impact didn't affect him much. Fight! That figure spoke for the first time and charged forward. The chaotic battle spear danced in the air, and every attack exploded with a huge energy wave. Qin Feng was suppressed and kept retreating. With the weapon in hand, the combat strength of the figure had soared to an extremely terrifying level. Every time he attacked, it contained a powerful force. Is this the demeanor of a true peerless genius? Qin Feng smiled bitterly. He was no match for him. He couldn't even take out the stone axe. The main reason was that he couldn't use the stone axe's power at all. Boom! He was sent flying and heavily injured once again. Whoosh! Chaotic light burst out like a meteor, bringing with it peerless power. It pierced through the starry sky and charged over. Chaotic light surged like a vast ocean, vast and deep, making people despair. Under this kind of power, even Qin Feng couldn't help but feel a trace of despair. The peerless genius of the past was too terrifying. He was invincible among his peers. In a trance, he seemed to see half a corpse in the depths of the starry sky, with a broken spear stained with blood, gradually moving away in the desolate starry sky. Another ancestor of the pure blood lineage? In the bloody battle back then, even his weapon was broken and his body was blown up, Qin Feng murmured. How could he be willing to lose like this? I can't die like this. At this moment, Qin Feng roared to the sky, and his battle power surged. Boom! He flipped his palm, and the savage peak appeared in his hand. Qin Feng injected his mental energy into the savage peak, and threw it out. Boom! The palm-sized savage peak expanded in the wind, and in the blink of an eye, it became a few hundred feet tall, like a small mountain, and pressed forward. The surging chaotic light was crushed. Qin Feng was shocked. In the face of death, he instantly understood the use of the savage peak. The savage peak looked ordinary and didn't have much use, but the strange thing was that it didn't need spiritual energy or mental energy. No, to be precise, it wasn't pure mental energy. It was the yin and yang energy of mental energy. That's right, it was the yin and yang energy of mental energy. At the moment of life and death, his mental energy fluctuated and resonated with the savage peak. He had tried before, but it didn't work whether he injected his spiritual energy or mental energy. So in that instant, he thought of black and white and then yin and yang. So he decisively injected the yang and yin energy of mental energy into the savage peak. He didn't expect that the savage peak would become as heavy as a mountain when the two types of mental energy were injected. After crushing the chaotic light, the savage peak directly pressed down on the figure. Clang! A crisp sound was heard, and the savage peak shrank and was sent flying. At the same time, the figure was also sent flying. The savage peak shrank rapidly, and it was pulled back by Qin Feng's mental energy. Qin Feng looked at the normal-looking savage peak in his hand. After clashing head-on with the primal Chaos War Spear, it did not leave any mark. This boosted his confidence. The halberd was the biggest problem, but now that it was blocked by the savage peak, he was no longer afraid. Boom! Qin Feng continued to inject the yin and yang energy of mental energy into the savage peak, and then controlled it to smash forward. The two of them fought again, and the chaotic halberd and the savage peak kept clashing. Sparks flew everywhere, and clanking sounds were heard. In the end, Qin Feng was still defeated. He only had a basic understanding of the savage peak, and he couldn't command it as he wished. Most importantly, his yin and yang energy wasn't dense and pure enough. The yang energy barely reached the standard due to the condensation of yang energy in his body, but the yin energy was far from it. The imbalance between the two caused the savage peak's power to be greatly weakened. The savage peak gradually lost its power, and Qin Feng was once again in danger, facing a life and death crisis. Bang! He was swept by the halberd's energy, and blood splattered on his body. He was severely injured. Poochie! The halberd swept past, and Qin Feng was sent flying, and his chest caved in. He got up with difficulty, and his eyes were obscure. To be able to become a peerless genius who looked down on the firmament realm, it was too terrifying. Qin Feng's life force was gradually fading, and his aura was greatly reduced as he was constantly sent flying. Am I going to fail? Qin Feng muttered to himself as he looked at the yellow figure quickly approaching. If you can't pass this stage, you will die in vain in the future. Descendant of the pure-blooded lineage, this is your last chance. That figure let out an intense emotional fluctuation as he roared. His voice was filled with unconcealable unwillingness and despair. Our lineage is naturally heaven-defying. Even in a life-and-death situation, we can come back from the dead. You still have power in your body. Use it for the final attack. If you can't pass this stage, you will die in vain in the future. Rather than that, I might as well kill you now. Stand up and fight with me one last time, descendant of mine. Chapter 258. True Blood Body Sculpting. The figure was roaring, hoping that Qin Feng would unleash his strongest power and have a final showdown with him. Qin Feng was shaken. If he could not pass this trial, he could only die in vain in the future. Had their bloodline really reached such a cruel state? He could clearly feel that blood was thicker than water. His opponent wanted him to defeat him and pass the trial. However, he had to use his strongest power and kill him with a killing intent. This was a contradictory state of mind, painful and crazy. Qin Feng could feel this pain. His opponent wanted to protect him, but he had to be determined to kill him. Using such a cruel method to force a latecomer to rise up, how sad was that? The scenes of that time, the pieces of blood-stained bones in this ancient galaxy, constantly corroded Qin Feng's brain. Ah! Qin Feng roared at the sky. His mind shook violently and his body trembled. He stood up suddenly, and a trace of scarlet gradually climbed up from the corner of his eyes. His blood seemed to be boiling, and a battle intent that he had never felt before surged, almost making him lose control and beat him violently. In the depths of his blood, streaks of obscure spiritual light flashed, and then formed a strange shape. Qin Feng's eyes were blood-red. At the same time, he slowly put his palms together, and then formed a complicated and ancient seal. Boom! The moment the seal was formed, his body shook violently, and a fierce wind blew around him. A terrifying power was wreaking havoc around him. Pure blood bloodline, immortal reincarnation eye, open. A vertical eye slowly appeared between his eyebrows. When the vertical eye opened, it was scarlet in color. An extremely berserk energy was emitted from the vertical eye. Qin Feng looked indifferently at the chaotic figure that was charging at him, and his hands formed a seal. A cold and hoarse voice slowly came out of his mouth. Undying light. Whoosh! An extremely dense beam of scarlet light shot out from the vertical eye. At this moment, the entire galaxy seemed to dim, and only the scarlet light illuminated the universe. Fight! The chaotic figure shouted, and the battle spear stabbed forward. Crack! However, this time, the invincible halberd was as fragile as paper when it came into contact with the scarlet light. Layer by layer, the halberd broke apart. Ha ha ha! The scarlet light pierced through him, but he was still smiling. Tears flowed down his face. You have succeeded, but you have also embarked on the most difficult path. This road will be very difficult for you. Perhaps you will have companions, or perhaps you will be the only one facing this cruel world alone. But remember, no matter what, you must always remember that the pure-blooded lineage is not weaker than others. Even if I die, I will still be able to laugh proudly in the world. The figure laughed and his body gradually faded. Finally, he turned into a ray of light and disappeared. Only his emotionless voice echoed in this lonely universe. Our bloodline has been cursed by the heavens, so we should never place our hopes on the heavens. We are born to defy the heavens, so only by defying the heavens can we survive. Looking at the disappearing figure, Qin Feng's eyes turned red and his nose turned sour. At this moment, he felt the same way. Their bloodline was forced into a desperate situation and abandoned by this world. Rest in peace, ancestor. There will be a day when I will make this earth unable to bind our feet. The heavens will no longer be able to curse our bodies. Qin Feng clenched his fists as he murmured. After a while, he put away his heavy heart and cast his gaze on the universe. Buzz. Under his gaze, a crack slowly opened in the depths of the universe. A drop of blood penetrated through the crack. At this moment, Qin Feng felt that this drop of blood seemed to have distorted time and space and traveled from an endless distance. This drop of blood was bright and glistening, and it emitted a soft light. Qin Feng's nose turned sour again. From this drop of blood, he felt an emotion that could only be felt by kinship where blood was thicker than water. You were beaten up and your body and soul was destroyed, but you risked your life to preserve a drop of blood? Qin Feng said coldly. He could feel that there was not much divinity left in this drop of blood. However, it was precisely because of this that he could use it. Ancestor, help me rise. Qin Feng stared at the drop of blood and spread out his hands. Buzz buzz. The drop of blood vibrated, and there seemed to be ancient Sanskrit chanting, accompanied by shouts and unwilling resistance. Swoosh. The drop of blood shot over and directly entered Qin Feng's forehead. At this moment, Qin Feng's body shook, and countless rays of blood seeped out of his pores. In an instant, he was covered in blood. All the blood in his body was expelled by this drop of blood, leaving only a small amount of pure blood. The drop of blood flowed in his body, and wherever it passed, it would turn blood red and remove all the impurities in the original blood. In the end, Qin Feng's entire body shriveled up like a bag of skin, and 90% of the blood was removed. Roar. Qin Feng roared as indescribable pain eroded his nerve. Even with his temperament, he could not help but roar with a ferocious expression. His bones and meridians were all infected by the drop of blood, and then they broke down bit by bit, turning into blood. That kind of situation was like his bones being crushed bit by bit, and the pain was unbearable. Gritting his teeth, Qin Feng clung to the last shred of clarity in his heart, enduring the pain of having his bones shattered. Because he knew that this was to help him reconstruct his body, to help him build a stronger body. The moment the drop of blood entered his body, Qin Feng understood that in ancient times, the strengthened bone realm was actually the body-shaping realm, which completely shaped the whole body. After the changes of time, some techniques were cut off, and in the end, only the bone-shaping realm was left, which was later called the strengthened bone realm. According to the complete cultivation system, the current realm was actually only a part of the real realm. Body-shaping realm, his bones, blood, skin, and meridians were all being reconstructed. His whole body was crushed bit by bit, and the impurities were removed and then reconstructed bit by bit. This was undoubtedly a painful torment for him. In the end, Qin Feng persevered. The blood turned into bones again, and they were tougher than before. Blood was regenerated from his bones and tendons, flowing endlessly through his meridians and into every corner of his body. His flesh and blood regained their vitality, and his body swelled back to normal. At this time, Qin Feng's eyes that had been closed for who knew how long slowly opened. His eyes were as deep as the stars, surging with a vast luster. Is this the inheritance of a true blood? Clenching his fists and feeling the surging power in his body, Qin Feng smiled comfortably. He had finally passed the third trial, and his harvest was great. More importantly, his body had changed. This was a true rebirth of his bones, skin, blood, and bones. It was a sublimation in all aspects. This was much better than just being the strongest strengthened bone realm. Probably not many people in the world could have this kind of treatment. After all, the body-shaping realm had been replaced by the strengthened bone realm. People in this realm only knew about the strengthened bone realm. They didn't know anything else. Although his strength was still at the peak of the strengthened bone realm, his true battle strength had increased by too much. He even had the confidence to challenge a spirit-detecting expert. This was a kind of absolute confidence. That drop of blood had allowed his body to evolve to an extremely high level, and it had laid down a solid foundation for his rise. No one else could have this kind of transformation. The body-shaping realm molded the entire body, while the strengthened bone realm molded the bones. Even if one molded the strongest bones, there would still be flaws. That drop of blood had made up for all of the flaws in the strengthened bone realm, making it truly perfect. Qin Feng's current strength was not something others could compare to. Even the princes of the imperial family could not compare to him. The space in front of him twisted, and a stone door slowly appeared. Looking at the stone door, Qin Feng faintly smiled, stood up, and stretched. Chapter 259. Pure Blood, you actually succeeded, the small crimson tower said softly as it emitted a gentle red light. There was surprise and shock in his tone, but most of it was relief. Over the years, there have been many pure-blooded cultivators who have made it here. However, 99% of them failed and were buried here. The protection of the ancestors' will. Qin Feng laughed. He was not arrogant or complacent. He still remembered that, if it weren't for that figure's reminder, he wouldn't have burst out with a shocking fighting spirit and awakened his bloodline at the critical moment. Even more so, he wouldn't be able to activate the undying tensei of the pure-blooded lineage. In the end, he could only nurse a grievance. "Can I challenge the fourth stage?" Qin Feng asked. No. The small crimson tower directly refused, and its attitude was firm. The fourth stage's test doesn't only involve talent. Not to mention that you can't pass the fourth stage, you can't even go up to the fourth level. Without sufficient strength, This stage will not be open to you. Successor, you should know when to advance and when to retreat. Absorb the items from the first 3 stages and it will be enough for you to rise. In the future, when you have reached a certain level of strength, you can try the next stage again. Red Tower spoke very decisively, and Qin Feng could only drop the subject. After all, clearing 3 stages in a row had indeed given him a huge harvest, and he needed time to digest it. Senior, can you tell me about that period of time? Qin Feng asked. Those who know are guilty. The current you is not qualified to know the secrets of that period of time. Hong Ta warned, remember, before you have the ability to protect yourself, do not reveal your identity as a pure-blooded. To this day, there are still people pursuing our bloodline? Qin Feng clenched his fists, his heart full of resentment. They had been enslaved for so many years. Could it be that those people still wouldn't let them go? Was he really going to kill them all? Being hunted down through the ages, there's no end to it. Even if our bloodline has long since declined, even if countless years have passed, even if all the heroes have perished, but as long as they are not completely dead, they will be wary. The heaven-defying bloodline is innately powerful and endlessly glorious, illuminating the ages. However, it is also a type of sorrow, as the heavens do not allow it. Cast down the curse, break its roots, and destroy its source. Qin Feng was silent. His heart burned with grief and indignation. Was it the unfairness of the heavens, or was it the heartlessness of humanity? If the earth doesn't allow it, then just trample it. If the heavens are unfair, then just poke it. Our bloodline doesn't respect the heavens, nor the earth. Go against the heavens and break the cruel shackles of the world. To have such a great ambition is extremely good. The ancestors of the past should also be gratified. Hong Ta spoke, his tone becoming much gentler. Qin Feng collected himself and asked, "Where are my 2 friends? How are they?" "They are also undergoing their own trials," Red Tower said. Qin Feng was puzzled and asked, "Since they are also pure-blooded, why is the test different from mine?" He believed that with the talent of those 2, if they could receive the same treatment as him, their cultivation would definitely increase greatly. This was because he personally believed that his inheritance was the best. There is no harm in telling you. The pure-blooded bloodline is also divided into different clans. They do not belong to the same clan as you. The small Crimson Tower spoke softly, recounting a tragic past. Our tribe was a brilliant and powerful one. Our light illuminated the universe. Some clans were innately powerful, and their leaders were even more outstanding. Because they were too powerful, they were feared by the heavens. When they were destroyed, they were cursed. Back then, if they hadn't used a scheme to transfer away so many of our elites, how could they have slaughtered our bloodline so easily? Qin Feng listened quietly, his fists clenched tightly. His ancestors didn't die because they couldn't defeat the enemy, but rather because they were secretly plotted against. We were meritorious subjects. Back then, when the heavens split and the outer realms invaded, it was our tribe that did everything we could and sacrificed many talents to protect this world. However, later on, we were schemed against by them. Those powerful leaders risked their lives, and their blood dyed the universe. Before they died, they swore a divine blood oath, and only then did they not dare to kill us to the last, leaving behind some of the old, weak women and children. However, they were too afraid of our bloodline. They were worried that a pure-blooded would return to their ancestral roots, so they forced those defenseless descendants to marry other clans. There were even some who forced them to marry beasts. In the end, the pure-blooded bloodline was completely wiped out by them. Then, they sent those people to a barbarian land and strictly guarded them. Hearing this, Qin Feng already understood. The descriptions on the reliefs were far less cruel and sorrowful than what he had personally experienced. Their bloodline had actually experienced such inhumane destruction. In order to thin out the pure-blooded bloodline, they were willing to do anything. Fortunately, our bloodline was born to defy the heavens. Even the heavens could not stop us. Occasionally, there would be bloodline mutations in the later generations, and they would become pure-blooded. Your bloodline was very mottled before, but after the inheritance of the true blood, the pure-blooded bloodline has truly been revived in your body. As a pure-blooded, you bear the responsibility of washing away the shame of our bloodline and let our ancestors feel gratified in the endless hell. Qin Feng nodded heavily. The imperial capital was the descendants of those executioners. The first step of his revenge was to overthrow this place, and let the pure-blooded descendants truly obtain freedom. After a moment of silence, he asked softly, "My Yin energy is unable to complete it. Is there a suitable one here?" His Yang energy was barely qualified because of the help of the Yang energy in his body. However, his Yin energy had not made any progress. This also caused the Yin-Yang fusion formation to be unable to be used, and the Yin-Yang technique could not be cultivated. The Yin energy was directly related to the Yin-Yang fusion formation and the Yin-Yang technique, so Qin Feng naturally placed great importance on it. However, in the Saint Ryuin and the imperial capital, he had not encountered this type of energy. The guardian of the small tower's inheritance should know that he was a spiritual power master, and should be able to detect his Yin energy. Moreover, the Dark Evil Tower's collection was definitely rich, so it should have this type of energy substance. "Let's go, I'll send you to the land of fortune." The Red Tower was very decisive, and a light swept over. When the light faded, Qin Feng appeared in a palace. The palace was completely gray, and the air was filled with an ancient smell. There were many stone pillars supporting the palace, and it looked very old, but there was nothing special about it. However, after entering this place, Qin Feng kept having an uncomfortable feeling. As for the source of this feeling, he also did not know. It was as if this palace did not fit in with the real world. In short, this place made him feel very uncomfortable. If the Red Tower did not let him in, he would have thought of a way to escape. "Will there be Yin energy here?" Qin Feng muttered to himself. "There is, an item of extreme Yin, but whether or not you can obtain it will depend on your luck." The Red Tower's voice suddenly sounded. Qin Feng was stunned and quickly asked, "Where is it?" Chapter 260. Chapter 260 Objects of Extreme Yin. Qin Feng was speechless. He carefully sized up the palace. The stone walls around the palace were engraved with the images of ferocious beasts, many of which he had never seen before. These beasts were clearly just engraved on the stone wall, but there seemed to be a substantial aura spreading out, making it difficult for people to look directly at them. In the center of the hall there was a rather large stone platform. The stone platform was made of strange stones from an unknown era, and in the center of the stone platform there was a well. Wisps of light black air rose from above. The air around the stone platform seemed to be even thicker. Tiny ice dots could be seen, which was a sign that the air was about to freeze. A breeze blew from above, instantly turning into a black, chilly wind. Under the effect of the air pressure, most of the chilly wind was blown towards Qin Feng. "So the item of extreme Yin is here." Looking at this scene, Qin Feng nodded, a fiery light slowly surging in his eyes. At this point, even a fool would know that the item of extreme Yin mentioned by the Red Tower should be in that well. He reached out to grab a gust of chilly wind, but his expression quickly changed. The bone-chilling coldness almost caused his brain to explode. Motherf ***, why is it so cold? Qin Feng was shocked. What exactly was this extreme Yin object? This is Yin wind. Wind is caused by the difference in the temperature of the airflow. This is a normal phenomenon. Hong Ta said, however, at the bottom of this abyss, there is an item of extreme Yin. When the wind passes through there, it will be contaminated with some of the cold aura from the item of extreme Yin, thus forming the Yin wind. The Yin wind is not an ordinary wind. This kind of thing contains the power of Yin and is extremely powerful. However, this Yin wind can only wreak havoc in this limited space. Moreover, it is the weakest kind of Yin wind. Otherwise, you would not have been able to enter this place. Licking his lips, Qin Feng slowly approached the stone platform. The spirit energy in his body and the mental force in his mind were ready to burst out at any moment. Along the way, nothing abnormal happened. Qin Feng approached the stone platform. The stone platform was not high, only about 1 meter tall. He easily jumped up and walked to the center of the stone platform. He looked at the well. Rather than calling it a well, it was more appropriate to call it a bottomless black hole. There were many indecipherable patterns engraved on the side of the well. Some of them were similar to totems, which were quite profound and mysterious. The inside of the well was incomparably dark. That kind of darkness was not ordinary darkness. It was a kind of darkness without any impurities. The darkness was pure and terrifying, because you couldn't see how deep it was. You couldn't even see an inch. You could only see the surface. If it weren't for the fact that it was shaped like a well, it would be easy to mistake it for a painting carved on the stone platform. Qin Feng stood by the well. At this moment, the yang energy in his body spread throughout his body, resisting the invasion of the Yin wind. He looked at the mysterious well that was like a black hole and frowned. Although the black airflow around him was stronger than before, it could not do anything to the yang qi produced by the heavenly thunder bead. "Do I need to go in?" Qin Feng asked in his heart. "Not bad. We're going in just like that? Aren't you a little too impulsive?" Hearing this, Qin Feng felt his scalp go numb. This black hole was too mysterious. He didn't even know what it was. Wasn't it too reckless to go in just like that? There's no other way. If you want to get something, you have to pay the corresponding price. Do you think you can get it so easily without paying anything? Hearing this, Qin Feng could only grit his teeth and brace himself. He constantly drew out the yang energy in his body, wrapped it around his body, and jumped into the black hole. Opportunities were accompanied by danger. If you wanted to get something better than others, you had to put in more effort than others. He understood this principle, so since he was already here, he could only take things as they came. Being indecisive was not his principle. As Qin Feng entered the black hole, other than his vision turning black, he also felt a terrifying pressure. An endless amount of Yin energy attacked him, wanting to crush him. Even with the protection of yang energy, Qin Feng could still faintly feel a bone-piercing chill. Withdraw your yang energy and let your body adapt to this Yin energy. Hearing Hongta's words, Qin Feng's face was a little unnatural. He laughed dryly and said, "Isn't it too fast? I still don't know what's here." "There's no danger here. It's all pure Yin energy." Hongta said with some surprise in his tone, "This item of extreme Yin is a little unusual. If you can refine and absorb it, the benefits to you will be unimaginable." Hearing this, Qin Feng's heart was boiling. If Hongta could speak in such a tone, then this item of extreme Yin was definitely a rare treasure. The Yin energy here is all emitted by that item. Now that you're in contact with the Yin energy, you can be considered to have made initial contact with that item. It will be of some help to you when you refine it later. Qin Feng pursed his lips, some excitement on his face. "What is it?" In here, one's perception is suppressed. I can't tell what it is now. Moreover, I'm only a bottom-level inheritance guardian, so my knowledge is limited. Hongta's tone sank slightly. He paused for a moment, then said, "However, if I'm not wrong, it's very likely to be the Yellow Springs pill." Yellow Springs pill? The unfamiliar term stunned Qin Feng. The Yellow Springs pill is formed by gathering and condensing the Yin energy from the depths of the earth. It takes 100 years to form a gas, 1,000 years to form a liquid, and 10,000 years to form a pill. It gathers the yin energy from the depths of the earth and condenses after thousands of years of compression, forging, and condensing. This pill contains the yin energy of the earth, and can be considered to be nurtured by the earth. If you really compare it, it's not inferior to the 10 great spiritual fires of the world. It's that amazing? Qin Feng opened his mouth in surprise. Of course, if you refine it, your spiritual yin energy will also become pure and perfect. However, Hong Ta suddenly paused, and his tone was clearly a little heavy. However what? Qin Feng asked. Hong Ta was silent for a moment. After a moment, he suddenly asked, "Do you know why this pill is called the Yellow Springs pill?" Qin Feng shook his head, his face blank. "What does the word Yellow Springs make you think of?" Hearing this, Qin Feng's eyes suddenly widened. A chill rose in his heart. In legends, the Yellow Springs seem to be related to hell. It can't be, right? That's just a legend. How could there be hell in this world? If there was, then wouldn't there be reincarnation? This kind of saying is too laughable. Qin Feng tried his best to smile, wanting to dissolve this gloomy atmosphere. However, Hong Ta's silence made him feel a little cold. Some things can't be denied if you haven't come into contact with them. Hong Ta's tone was very heavy, and he said, "There was once a rumor that the Yellow Springs pill was an item of the underworld. It was condensed from the Yellow Springs liquid in the heart of the Yellow Springs. It can also be said that it is the heart of the Yellow Springs." Chapter 261. Devour. Regarding this legend, there is indeed no verifiable evidence. There has never been any evidence to prove the existence of the underworld. After a pause, Red Tower continued. Qin Feng heard a sense of uneasiness in its tone that he had never felt before. In that extremely distant era, there were some legends about the underworld. It seemed that the underworld really existed, but no one knew what happened in the end. It was as if that distant era was cut off from the future, resulting in no substantial records. However, later generations speculated that the underworld might be related to the heavenly fissure. Our lineage also had powerhouses search for it, but no one knows the results. As Red Tower spoke, its tone gradually became incomparably heavy. And it is very likely that the underworld pill is here. This also proves that our lineage's person succeeded. It is no wonder that existence mysteriously disappeared and did not participate in the final battle. Anything related to the underworld will not have a good ending. As he spoke, Red Tower continued, "Of course, what I've said is only limited to legends. Whether or not the underworld really existed is still very difficult to verify. After all, in our era, we have never heard of any evidence of the underworld. The underworld pill is the heart of the underworld of the underworld. This saying is somewhat unreliable. The former is more realistic. It is only condensed from the Earth's yin energy and has nothing to do with the underworld." Qin Feng could not calm down for a long time. Although what it said was just a legend, it sounded too horrifying. The underworld, the gathering place of countless ghosts. Just thinking about it made him numb. Moreover, the heavenly fissure was a wake-up call for him. Those who were related to the underworld did not have a good ending. If he directly took the heart of the underworld, wouldn't he directly take his life? It does sound horrifying. However, since it has come to this step, whether it is condensed from the earth or the heart of the underworld, I will take it today. With that, Qin Feng directly withdrew his yang energy defense, allowing the yin energy to invade his body. His body was also slowly descending as he absorbed even more cold yin energy. Although the cold yin energy here was far stronger than ordinary cold yin energy, Qin Feng's body had absorbed a lot of it before, so he had some resistance. Therefore, to him, it did not cause much trouble. At most, it made him feel a little cold. His body descended at a steady speed in the boundless darkness. The surrounding cold energy corroded his body and swam back and forth in his body. The cold energy was enough to freeze a normal person into an ice cube. The further down they went, the more terrifying the cold energy became. Qin Feng also felt a little pain, but he was also slowly adapting to the cold energy here. Dong. With a slight sound, Qin Feng felt the soles of his feet stepping on something solid. His expression gradually turned serious. It seemed like he had reached the end. He looked around. The light here was no longer like before. There was a faint light, but it was very dim and appeared extremely oppressive. His gaze swept back and forth in all directions. Suddenly, his gaze abruptly paused. A long while later, an arc slowly hung at the corner of his mouth. Yellow Spring Elixir, I found you. Within the darkness, there was a spot where the darkness was so dense that it had almost turned into liquid. The dense and cold energy had directly formed a faint layer of ice in the surroundings. In the center, there was a black bead about the size of an adult's fist. It should be called a round elixir because it was in a solid state. Within the round elixir, there seemed to be a black liquid squirming. However, the center was not black, but a similar white color. It was like a white light that illuminated the darkness here. Is that the Yellow Spring Elixir? An item of extreme energy? Qin Feng's face was gradually replaced by ecstasy. After absorbing the cold energy, he could set up the yin-yang fusion formation and practice the yin-yang art. Qin Feng quickly walked over. As he got closer, the fire in his eyes became more intense. His palm gently pressed against the layer of ice. Immediately, the thin layer of ice that was as thin as paper instantly shattered. At the same time, an exceptionally frightening chill suddenly attacked him. That chill caused him to involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. Along with the shattering of the ice membrane, the cold energy contained within that could not be released immediately rushed towards Qin Feng, enveloping him. The cold current surged and the cold energy penetrated into his body through his pores. As soon as the cold energy entered his body, Qin Feng's body suddenly tensed up as if he was about to be frozen. What do we do now? Should we shatter it? Qin Feng endured the pain and asked. Directly wrap it with spiritual energy and absorb it into your body. Hearing this, Qin Feng's scalp suddenly went numb. Absorb it into my body? Are you kidding me? I can barely resist this thing now. Moreover, this is not the purest cold energy. If I absorb it into my body, won't I be frozen into an ice cube? The Yellow Spring Elixir is formed by gathering the power of the earth and compressing it for thousands of years. It cannot be broken. Otherwise, its essence will be lost. Only by refining it in your body can you condense the most perfect energy and stimulate the purest energy in your body, Hong Ta said solemnly. Your body has already condensed yang energy. Although it can't compare to the energy of the Yellow Spring Elixir, as long as you can withstand it, it shouldn't be a big problem. Don't forget, you still have the Fire God technique. Hearing this, Qin Feng's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. No matter how dangerous it was, he could not let the essence of the Yellow Spring Elixir be lost. Every step of the yin-yang art had to be perfect without any flaws. Thinking of this, the ruthlessness in his eyes gradually turned into madness. Then, with a wave of his hand, spiritual energy shot out and wrapped around the Yellow Spring Elixir, then began to compress it. Under the compression of the spiritual energy, the Yellow Spring Elixir gradually shrank to the size of an ordinary elixir. However, the color of the elixir became denser and denser, causing people to tremble in fear. The Yellow Spring Elixir slowly floated in his palm. Feeling the extremely terrifying cold energy emitted from it, Qin Feng swallowed a mouthful of saliva. A moment later, his eyes suddenly focused and he opened his mouth and sucked the Yellow Spring Elixir into his body. Bang! With a soft sound, the yellow spring elixir suddenly shattered. A large amount of dense black energy completely enveloped Qin Feng like a tide. Streaks of black cold currents drilled into his body, penetrating every inch of his body. Boom! Intense pain surged into Qin Feng's heart like floodwaters at this moment. That indescribable iciness directly caused the blood within his body to show signs of solidifying. However, it was fortunate that he was prepared. With a move of his mind, he stubbornly resisted the bone-chilling wind. The light at the center of the yellow spring elixir was the most essential part of the cold energy. After the yellow spring elixir exploded, the light immediately followed Qin Feng's throat and entered his body like ice. Boom! Chapter 262. Condensing Yin Xia cold aura that could almost freeze a person began to move chaotically within Qin Feng's body. Wherever it passed, the soft qi paths became a little stiff. Specks of white crystals appeared and an intense pain assaulted him, causing Qin Feng's face, which was still able to maintain a calm expression, to instantly become distorted. The terrifying chilling aura caused his mind to go into a trance for a short moment, as if he was frozen in that instant. The divine lightning bead and the underworld elixir were not on the same level. The difficulty of refining the underworld elixir was much more terrifying. As the terrifying pain assaulted him, Qin Feng's eyes instantly turned blood-red. Even with his temperament, he could not help but roar. With his meridians frozen, the chilling aura seemed to have penetrated into his bones. It was as if his bones were being broken bit by bit. The terrifying pain spread from his bones to his brain, almost causing him to lose his mind. Circulating the fire god art, the power of the heavenly cycle fire gathered and entered his body through his pores. In the end, it condensed together and turned into a ball of multicolored flames that suppressed the underworld elixir. The power of fire was the purest fire element in the world. Although it could not be compared to the spiritual fire, its purity was at the pinnacle of fire. No other flame could compare to it. This was also the main reason why he dared to directly swallow the underworld elixir. After several encirclements, the power of fire finally clashed with the underworld pill for the first time. Buzz! In an instant, Qin Feng's body seemed to be torn apart by an invisible force. His entire mind violently shook, causing him to lose his mind and his consciousness to become chaotic. "Wake up!" Hong Ta's shout suddenly rang out. The sound waves spread out and awakened Qin Feng's consciousness. Qin Feng was also startled by this situation. He had actually almost fainted from the collision. This was too terrifying. If he had really fainted, without the power of fire to restrain the underworld elixir and the yang energy to protect his body, he would have died in less than a minute. Once again, he focused his mind and controlled the power of fire to surround the underworld elixir. Buzz! Another collision occurred. However, this time around Qin Feng was prepared. His mind was in a daze for a split second before he regained his wit. After which, he maneuvered the power of fire and wrapped around the fleeing yellow spring pill. Boom! Boom! The yellow spring pill struggled violently, shaking off the fire force's encirclement in a few moments, and then escaped. Although it was very difficult, Qin Feng's heart was filled with joy. Because of this, it meant that the yellow spring pill's yin qi had already surpassed ordinary energy. Only the yin qi condensed from such yin qi would be able to activate the yin qi in the physical body to the greatest extent. From there, it would resonate with mental energy and become pure mental energy yin qi. After several failed attempts, Qin Feng was not discouraged in the slightest. Now that the yellow springs pill was in his body, its power would only gradually be consumed. However, the power of fire was supported by the fire element, so it was endless and always maintained at its peak state. Wanting to suppress it was only a matter of time. Thus, the two types of energy continued to wreak havoc in Qin Feng's body. Every time they collided, the underworld elixir would escape. However, as the number of collisions increased, the time it took for the underworld elixir to break through the defense of the power of fire also gradually increased. Obviously, its power was slowly being consumed. The painful time was like a 1,000-year-old tortoise crawling slowly. At a certain moment, Qin Feng's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. He sensed that the underworld pill in his body had clearly slowed down. He smiled coldly. "Now that you're in my body, do you think you can overturn the heavens?" Soon after, he closed his eyes again. The spiritual energy wrapped around the power of fire in his body suddenly sped up and collided with each other again. The spiritual energy flames quickly wrapped around the underworld elixir, and the latter shook violently, trying to shake off the power of fire. However, this time it did not succeed. "Do you think I'll let you escape? It's over." Qin Feng sneered in his heart. The spiritual energy in his qi was like a cheetah that had been dormant for a long time. It quickly attacked, and the enormous spiritual energy almost instantly wrapped around the underworld elixir. Then, like a hot knife through butter, it forcibly dragged the underworld elixir into his qi. The underworld elixir constantly struggled and resisted. However, against the power of fire, rich spiritual energy, and yang energy, it was no different from an egg striking a rock. "It's time to condense." Looking at the underworld elixir that was fighting like a trapped beast, Qin Feng smiled. Soon after, the spiritual energy flames quickly wrapped around it and began to condense. Under the urging of the spiritual energy and the power of fire in his body, the underworld elixir was still fighting like a trapped beast, constantly churning violently. Although its resistance was not weak, it had already reached Qin Feng's base. Moreover, the power of both sides had already switched. Therefore, the underworld elixir's resistance was undoubtedly a mantis trying to stop a chariot. After a short stalemate, it began to helplessly shrink. When the underworld elixir shrank to the size of a palm, it once again stopped moving. "Compress it again." Gritting his teeth, Qin Feng tightly closed his eyes. The spiritual energy flames that wrapped around the underworld elixir were suddenly pushed to the maximum power, and then fiercely compressed. Bang! A soft, muffled sound quietly rang out from within his body. Following the muffled sound, the resistance that exhausted Qin Feng dissipated into thin air. He forcefully raised his mind, and the devouring power erupted. The strands of yin energy that were compressed in the underworld elixir were absorbed and turned into genuine yin energy. Half an hour later, Qin Feng heaved a sigh of relief. His entire body collapsed, and his chest violently rose and fell. The condensation of yin energy was finally a success. Exhausted to the point of collapse, Qin Feng directly lay on his back, panting heavily. The energy in his body seemed to have been sucked dry, and it took a long time for him to recover a little. He sat up, and his face was filled with unconcealable joy. After so long, he finally managed to condense the most perfect yin energy. After enjoying it for a while, he quickly regained his senses, and immediately entered into a state of cultivation to recover his overused body. In his body, not only was there yang energy and yin energy, even his spiritual energy had been assimilated by the yin energy, turning into a black spiritual energy that carried a terrifying yin energy. However, at this moment, the yin energy that was enough to freeze a person's blood was incomparably gentle. Wherever it passed, there was no pain or coldness. Instead, there was a jade-like warmth that made people feel very comfortable. Moreover, wherever the black spiritual energy passed, the meridians, flesh, and blood that were frozen to the point that they were beyond repair rapidly recovered. The meridians, flesh, and blood once again regained their vitality. After this ordeal, the meridians, flesh, and blood were clearly more resilient than before. After the spiritual energy that contained the yin energy circulated in his body, Qin Feng's broken body was completely repaired, and it was even more resilient than before. An item of extreme yin is really amazing. Feeling the yin energy in the spiritual energy, Qin Feng could not help but sigh. Previously, when he condensed yang energy, it was very simple. However, this time, the condensation of yin energy was different. Even his spiritual energy carried a terrifying yin energy. It was enough to show that this yin energy was extraordinary, and it was not comparable to the current yang energy. Thinking of this, he could not help but feel a little distressed. Both the yang and yin energy had reached the standard, but there was a serious imbalance. Boom! As if it knew what Qin Feng was thinking, the red tower shook. An ray of spiritual light rushed into the space between his eyebrows. At the same time, it said, only the 10 great spiritual fires can be compared to the underworld elixir. In the future, if you have the opportunity to get close, you will be able to sense it. Chapter 263. Yin and Yang body. After successfully condensing the yin energy, Qin Feng could no longer hold back the excitement in his heart and laughed loudly. In the dark space, his unbridled laughter could be heard everywhere. After laughing for a while, Qin Feng slowly stopped and began to absorb the cold yin energy in the surroundings. Refining the underworld elixir consumed quite a bit of his energy, and as the underworld elixir was refined, the cold yin energy emitted by the underworld elixir that caused people's expressions to change upon hearing it became his best nourishment. About half an hour later, Qin Feng's pale face gradually became rosy, and his whole body emitted a jade-like luster. This was the sign of his spirit energy being saturated. The last place will be open for you, go. Before Qin Feng could speak, a ray of light engulfed him. When his vision recovered, he appeared in a foreign world. Mountains, rivers, forests, flowers, everything was there. It was no different from a normal world. But Qin Feng clearly felt that something was wrong. He carefully sensed for a moment and found that the flow of time in this world was very slow. A spiritual space? Qin Feng was shocked. He had experienced it once in the city of Sin. Only a high-level spirit master could open up this special space that could only be used once. 15 times the flow of time. Qin Feng was shocked. The flow of time in this world was 15 times slower than normal. In other words, if he cultivated here for 15 days, only 1 day would pass in the outside world. There are still 2 months before the heavenly road opens. Qin Feng's eyes flickered. This was a great opportunity for him. He could make up for his lack of time here, and it was even possible for him to enter the spirit-detecting realm here. What he lacked the most now was time. If he wanted to enter the spirit-detecting realm, he needed a long time to settle down, and this was something he had no chance of doing in the outside world. Peng peng. Suddenly 2 figures descended. Tan Xian and Jing Wui also appeared in this world. The 3 of them looked at each other and could see the pain in each other's eyes. Obviously, they had the same experience as Qin Feng. They had all witnessed the glory and darkness of their lineage. This is the work of a spirit master. The flow of time is at least 15 times slower than the normal world, Qin Feng said. That's fine too. I haven't had a breakthrough in over a year. Let's summon the spirit here and kill our way back, Jing Wui said. I hope Tiger Knight and the others haven't left yet. Tan Xian's tone was light, but it carried an extremely cold, killing intent. Ha ha ha! The 3 of them looked at each other, then raised their heads and laughed. Only after going through this step could one hear the raging flames of hatred in each other's laughter. Here, they did not have to worry about time. Everyone was digesting their respective inheritances and increasing their strength. When time was not valued, the concept of time was very vague. Unknowingly, the 3 of them had been here for almost half a year. They hadn't reached the spirit-detecting realm, but their battle power was slowly accumulating. For example, Qin Feng was more adept at using the primeval war body and could maintain it for more than 3 minutes. The number of spirit vortexes he could condense had also increased to 28, and the spirit seals he could create were even more powerful. The only thing he regretted was that he still couldn't successfully activate the Immortal Tensei I. During the battle, he had accidentally activated the Immortal Tensei I and used the Immortal Light, but now he couldn't use it. However, his yin and yang energy had reached the standard, so he could set up the yin and yang fusion formation. This was his trump card. Just with the yin and yang fusion formation, he was confident he could fight against a mid-stage spirit-detecting realm expert. Hand of holding yin. A cold shout suddenly rang out as the dark black spiritual energy in his body started to circulate rapidly in a strange manner. After a brief moment, Qin Feng lightly shouted as he slapped out with his palm. The dark black spiritual energy erupted from his palm and turned into a huge black hand. On the huge hand there was a chilling intent that made one's heart palpitate. Wherever the giant black hand passed, there was a black light. It was as if even the air was being split in half, and there were bursts of wind and sonic booms in the air. The last 1,000-kilogram boulder exploded and shattered rocks flew everywhere. Looking at this scene, Qin Feng nodded with a smile. Although he hadn't fought against an expert before, as the caster, he was very clear about the power contained in the hand of holding yin. Not many people under the spirit-detecting realm could defend against it. The only thing he regretted was that the yang energy in his body couldn't compare to the yin energy, so the hand of holding yin was very weak and didn't have any destructive power. Only when the yang and yin energies were pure enough could the yin and yang technique be cultivated to its most perfect state. The combination of the two was like the fusion of yin and yang, and the power was terrifying. His yang energy wasn't pure enough, so even if he cultivated the yin and yang technique, its power would be greatly weakened. Although my yang energy is weaker than my yin energy, I'm now on the right track to cultivating the yin and yang technique. I wonder if... Qin Feng softly muttered as the yin and yang technique's cultivation method appeared in his mind. Yin and yang technique. Take the yang fire, condense the yang energy, and then you can control the yang hand, absorb the yin cold, and then control the yin hand. First the yang, then the yin, and the two hands intertwine to form the yin and yang, creating the power of yin and yang. The two hands nurture each other, refining the yin and yang energy, shaking the heavens and earth. Opposing the two hands is yin and yang, and it can turn into wind and thunder. When the two hands are the same, the yin and yang will be harmonious, and all living things will weep together. First yang, then yin, I've done it. As for the yin and yang fusion, what does it mean? Qin Feng pondered. The hand of holding yang was lacking in power, but he could figure out the fusion method. Without a doubt, the cultivation of the yin and yang technique would gradually deepen. The fusion of yin and yang would form the yin and yang energy. If he could achieve the fusion, its power would greatly increase. He was indeed on the right track, but he still didn't know much about cultivating the yin and yang technique. The main reason was that the yin and yang technique's cultivation method was too profound, so he could only barely understand a bit. However, he knew that if he wanted to use the yin and yang energy, he had to refine the yin and yang form. And to refine the yin and yang form, he had to fuse the yin and yang together. Only by fusing the yin and yang form could one form the yin and yang energy appear. The fusion of yin and yang is to fuse the two opposite spiritual energies together? Qin Feng looked calmly at the black and blue spiritual energies on each side. His left palm was the blue spiritual energy with the yang energy, while his right palm was the black spiritual energy with the yin energy. He frowned. This was too difficult. Although he could control the two spiritual energies of different attributes, one was extremely hot and the other was extremely cold. They were two extremes. Unless he used absolute power to forcefully suppress them, there was no other way. Their control was not as easy as the power of water and fire. After all, there was a method to the latter. He nodded. Although he felt that this was unrealistic, the yin and yang technique was an extremely mysterious thing. If it was so easy for him to cultivate it, he would doubt it. The more difficult it was, the more powerful the yin and yang technique was. In the following time, Qin Feng tried to fuse the two spiritual energies together. However, no matter how hard he tried, no matter how he tried, and even took into account the imbalance between the yin and yang energies and only extracted a small amount of the black spiritual energy to fuse, he still failed. Every time the extremely cold and hot spiritual energies collided, there would be a huge backlash. Even though he was the master of the two spiritual energies, he would sometimes feel his blood boil from the backlash. It seems that forcefully fusing them won't work. Qin Feng calmed down and didn't try to forcefully fuse the two spiritual energies. He knew that this method wouldn't work. Even if he used absolute power to forcefully fuse them together, it wouldn't be a true fusion, and the yin and yang energy wouldn't appear. The yin and yang energy was about the fusion of yin and yang, not forcefully fusing them together. Chapter 264. Breakthrough. Spirit Channeling. Old Devil. Qin Feng called out to the demonic eye. This was the 38th time he had done so, but there was no response. The demon eye continued to sleep. Qin Feng did not know whether this was good or bad. Back then, he had signed a contract with the demon eye, and it was effective for 3 years. According to the time in the outside world, there was still 1 or 2 months left. But according to the time he had spent, the 3 years had already passed. The demon contract did not take effect. Was it because the time was not up, or was it because the demon eye was asleep and could not be activated? He personally leaned towards the latter, because the demon contract was signed between him and the demon eye, and it should be calculated according to the time he spent in his body. Calculating carefully, it had been more than 2 or 3 months, but the demon contract had not taken effect. Therefore, he speculated that it was because the demonic eye was in a deep slumber. If this was the reason, then it was a little dangerous. Who knew when the demon eye would awaken? What if it was a few days or a few months later? He wouldn't even have time to think of countermeasures before the demon eye took over his body. If the demonic eye could still talk to him, he could at least try to stall for time through the other party's tone. But now that the demonic eye was in a deep slumber, once it awoke, he would probably cease to exist. Damn it, let's sleep. It's best if we sleep forever. Time flew by. Unknowingly, another 1.5 years had passed. On this day, an extremely powerful aura erupted in this world. That spiritual energy fluctuation still carried some spirituality. Spiritual energy with spirituality, this was a classic example of psychic communication. Among the 3, Tan Xian was the first to break through and reach the spirit-detecting realm. His body was surging with a terrifying amount of spiritual energy, which was very oppressive. 1. A long spear soared into the sky, whistling and surging. Finally, it landed in front of Tan Xian with a bang. The tip of the spear trembled, emitting a clear sound. At the same time, it rippled with an incomparably sharp feeling of power. Jing Wui smacked his lips as he sensed the strong oppressive aura coming from Tan Xian's body. What kind of good stuff did this guy inherit? Why do I feel that he's even stronger than the 7th prince at that time? Qin Feng also nodded. Tan Xian was still intentionally suppressing his aura, or else his aura would be even more oppressive. After successfully communicating with his spirit, his strength had reached a terrifying level. He was completely different from before. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. This was the power of psychic communication. This was also why even super geniuses would need several years of accumulation before they could take this step. Because this was a checkpoint where the carp leaped over the dragon gate. After that, he would naturally be able to soar freely in the future. He would truly soar to the heavens in one go. Damn it, we have to make a breakthrough as soon as possible. Otherwise, we won't be able to survive. Jingwei shook his head and entered the cave he had dug himself, calmly looking for an opportunity to make a breakthrough. Boom! A month later, another powerful aura erupted. Jingwei had also succeeded in communicating with his spirit and had broken through to this realm. For a moment, strong winds blew and spiritual energy trembled, causing his small cave to collapse. Damn, this entrance is a little awkward. Following a loud explosion, earth and rocks exploded, and Jingwei rushed out, his face covered in dust. Tan Xian, come out, let's fight. As soon as he came out, Jingwei clamored for a fight with Tan Xian. Boom! A long spear shot out rapidly, carrying a rather sharp aura fluctuation, as if it wanted to tear everything apart. Come at me, Jingwei shouted loudly, his eyes shining. He held a butcher's knife in his hand and directly slashed out. Boom! The air exploded, and spiritual energy swirled up strong winds, constantly whistling and wreaking havoc. After a while, the two of them walked out side by side. Their breaths were slightly out of breath, but there was a smile on their faces. Now, we just have to wait for Qin Feng to make a breakthrough. Then, we'll kill our way out and turn the world upside down. Jingwei laughed loudly. 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, 10 days. Half a month passed, and there was not the slightest movement in Qin Feng's seclusion area. This shouldn't be. This guy's foundation is no worse than ours. Why hasn't he made a breakthrough yet? Jingwei tilted his head and looked at Qin Feng's cave. Spirit connection is not a guarantee of success just because one has enough foundation. It still needs an opportunity. Tan Xian shook his head slightly and said, but with his talent it should be soon. I don't think he's inferior to us. Just like that, the two of them waited for another month, but there was still no movement from Qin Feng. This guy couldn't have forcefully broken through and met with an accident, right? Jingwei muttered, wanting to go in and take a look. Rumble! At that moment, the sky suddenly darkened and muffled thunder rolled, as if there was a thunder beast roaring, shaking one's heart. What a terrifying lightning tribulation! Why would there be lightning tribulation when this guy breaks through? Jingwei was speechless. How could there be lightning tribulation when breaking through from the strengthened bone realm to the spirit connection realm? It's not lightning tribulation, but his own. Tan Xian stared at the lightning tribulation, and after a long time, he said in shock, his own. Jingwei was astonished and said, this guy has been going through tribulations for more than a year, but most of them were small ones. Why is it so terrifying this time? Even they had to be careful when dealing with this kind of lightning tribulation. Kaboom! Lightning fell, shattering the mountain, and a figure rushed out in a sorry state. F***CK. What the F***CK is going on? Qin Feng shouted, and couldn't help but feel his heart palpitate. Tan Xian and Jingwei were speechless. You attracted lightning tribulation yourself, and you didn't even know it yourself. Qin Feng naturally knew what kind of tribulation this was. It was a devouring tribulation caused by the 100 tribulation heaven-devouring art. It was just that the lightning tribulation before was very small and not threatening, but why was it so powerful this time? He was shocked. However, the lightning tribulation didn't give him time to think. Bolts of lightning struck down, charring him, and smoke came out of his body. Qin Feng quickly dodged, and used the dragon's swimming body to move more than 1,000 meters in a few breaths. However, the lightning tribulation followed him like a shadow, covering the sky above him. The lightning bolts were like ferocious beasts, baring their fangs and claws, wanting to tear him apart. Qin Feng had no choice but to face it head-on. The 100 tribulation heaven-devouring art required one to go through 100 tribulations to reach perfection. He couldn't turn back, nor could he stop. He could only endure one tribulation at a time. Between heaven and earth, there were continuous rumbles, lightning flashed, and electric arcs surged. In the end, even Tan Xian and Jing Wui were shocked. The power of this lightning tribulation was enough to make even spirit-channeling experts feel threatened. What kind of thing did this guy do? Even the heavens want to kill him. Jing Wui whispered. The lightning tribulation lasted for an hour before it slowly dissipated. At this moment, Qin Feng didn't look like a human anymore. His whole body was charred black, as if he had just climbed out of a coal mine. There wasn't even a trace of breath. He can't be dead, right? Jing Wui said. Tan Xian stared at the charred Qin Feng. After a long time, he let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he's still alive. After he finished speaking, Qin Feng slowly sat up. His body cracked open like the bark of an old tree, revealing his skin that was as tender as a newborn's. His body shook, and a large piece of black skin fell off. It's coming. Qin Feng didn't have time to check his body's condition. The 100 tribulation heaven-devouring art quickly circulated, and the devouring power erupted, devouring the spiritual energy in the sky. It was so fast that it even formed a spiritual energy vortex gathering towards him. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.